Today we dive into the lore of the Daedric princes, those immortal sovereigns who rule the shifting wilds of oblivion and test the very edges of mortal freedom. From Azura's velvet twilight to Molag Bal's frozen chains, their realms reflect secret desires and hidden fears, reshaping history whenever a bargain is struck. Discover how these outsiders both threaten and complete the grand design of Mundus, turning every act of worship into a razor-thin choice between ruin and transcendence. Now let us begin. In the first unmeasured moment after convention, when the flame of creation still smoldered in the bones of the world, the Atada who would come to be called Idroth looked upon the newborn Mundus and felt the long ache of expenditure. Some fled back into the starless wheel to become the Magna G. Some remained, their divinity attenuated and earth-fast, to steady the firmament as Idra. And a smaller fellowship, equal in power yet divergent in yearning, recoiled from both paths and slipped beyond the fringe of Arnuel's light. These were the Notau ancestors, the ones who refused the weight of Nirn's mortal coil, the Daedroth, later styled Daedra, the Notau tribe, in the choral tongue of the Aldma. They turned their backs on Time's ordered river and sought refuge in the yawning dark, where Padame's first breath still echoed. In that place of infinite potential, oblivion, or the Void Sea, they would carve for themselves dominions immune to the slow erosion that came with sustaining a mortal world. It is said by Camelonwe of Aelina that the sundering between Idra and Daedra was neither moral nor sentimental, but mathematical. As creation refined itself to finite law, the Atada faced a ledger of diminishing returns. Those who continued to invest became the Earthbones, sturdy pillars underpinning reality, while those who desired unfettered being retreated. They surrendered the promise of linear permanence for a volatility that allowed them to reshape themselves at whim. Thus the difference was not one of potency, for each possessed immeasurable spark, but rather of consent. The Daedra would not consent to limitation. In rejecting Mundus, they unwittingly accepted another bondage, that of their own unbridled nature. For in oblivion, the thought of a prince is the substance of his plane, and every shifting impulse scars the fabric of his realm. Scholars of the Synod often imagine oblivion as a single, immeasurable expanse, yet the earliest Aldmeri runes paint a subtler picture, a kaleidoscopic shell around the spokes of Aetherius, each shard refracting a prince's private dream. In the dawning ages, before even the stars found their fixed song, those dreams collided and ruptured. Realms bled together, then recoiled, like oil upon water, until borders settled into coherent spheres. The process was neither quick nor bloodless. A myth recorded upon the Velothi glass tablets of Vivardenfell speaks of Bothia devouring Trinimac, and by that act, birthing the riptide that cleaved her realm of endless twilight from the neighbor seas. Whether literal or allegorical, the tale names one essential principle. The Daedra's appetites were formative, shaping not only themselves, but the very matter of their dominions. While oblivion congealed, Mundus wobbled through its earliest orbits, half-formed and perilously young. Between the newborn world and the churning void there existed no barrier but will. Yet the fledgling Idra, drained from erecting the mortal plane, had little left to spare. And so the Daedra watched with distant curiosity, sometimes with covetous fingers resting upon the seams of reality. They were at once siblings and strangers to the Idra, sharing lineage, but not obligation. In that estrangement grew a curious tension, neither open war nor cordial fraternity. The princes observed the young Nirn as a thing apart, occasionally dipping a talon or whisper through the liminal cracks to see how it would sing beneath their touch. Of these earliest probings, the oldest surviving account is etched upon the crystal lectern of the Sigic Order's hidden archives, recovered from a dream walk by Lawmaster Celarus. The passage describes a whisper wind from the far dark that taught the Aelnofi how to fold magicka upon itself, giving rise to the first tonal architects. Though the text refuses to name the whisperer, the resonance of the phrasing suggests the clandestine shaping of Hermamora, the woodland man, ever hungry for secret seeds before they sprout. Whether Mora's gift was boon or bane has long been debated, yet its implication is clear. From the very dawn, princes embroiled themselves in the mortar of mortality, not as sovereigns, but as catalysts of possibility. In the subsequent middling centuries of the Dawn era, where centuries and seconds blur, for linear time was still a fledgling concept, the princes began to define themselves by the thoughts they chose to keep. Azura, called Moonshadow, gathered the comforting hush of eventide and shaped it into a soft realm of indigo horizons. Molag Bal, whose name in the gilded parchments of the Sapiarchs is rendered Molag Bal, siphoned dread and dominion into a fetid pit he dubbed Cold Harbor, a mockery of Nirn cast in dead frost. Each plane emerged not as stone emerges from quarry, but as breath condenses upon glass, conjured instantly, yet solidifying only while the prince maintains desire. In this way, oblivion became a fractal mosaic of will, where cause and domain are indivisible. The Aedra, by contrast, had ceded their mutability to guarantee Mundus's coherence. They lay embedded in its crust, in its water tables, in the whispered algebra of gravity, too spent to reclaim their full stature. Thus the dynamic between the twin kindreds shifted. The Daedra, unshackled and whole, could peer into the mortal skein like lantern moths around a window, watching fragile lives flicker against the glow of linear time. Some grew curious, some contemptuous, a few protective in inscrutable ways, yet their influence remained largely observational until two converging forces beckoned them, the birth of mortal worship and the potential of covenant. No mortal culture was first to name the princes. Rather, princes revealed themselves piecemeal, adopting sobriquets that mortals could grasp. Early Nedic pictographs from the Ten Barrows depict a tall figure of chalk and void, arms spread over a kneeling hunter, labeled only with a rune approximating Mrrr, an echo of Mephala. Wandering Falmer scratchings inside the Blackreach caverns show a many-limbed, Artich-throned horror, surely a crude imagining of Jigalag before his shattering into the madness of Sheogorath. These testimonials demonstrate that veneration or fear emerged wherever boundary stones between planes thinned, often at sites of geomantic significance, those where lee currents braided tightly and allowed thoughts to cast longer shadows. As worship took shape, so too did a subtle exchange. Mortals offered reverence, sacrifice, or simple awe. In return, princes granted boons and, on occasion, fragments of their boundless power. Yet the commerce was never symmetrical. Daedra did not feed on prayer the way Aedra rely upon mythic recall to maintain their diminished presence. Instead, devotion functioned as invitation. It wrote names in vulnerable corners of mortal minds, forming spiritual apertures through which a prince's essence could pour. This delicate difference is crucial. To revere Akatosh is to stabilize the wheel of time. To revere Mehrunes Dagon is to open the furnace doors and risk being forged anew in his fires. But in those early eons, even the concept of a contractual pact, of formalized deal-making, remained naive. Mortal tongues were still forging words for sin, fate, and soul. The Aelnofi diaspora had not yet ossified into distinct elven nations. Men's primal tribes were but fractured embers born upon shifting tectonics of the world skin. In such flux, Daedric influence manifested not as grand crusades, but as whispered urgings. A night vision of Azura guiding one chieftain toward the seashell that would shape his people's fate, or a fitful dream of Clavicus Vile, pronounced Clavicus Val, offering a glittering promise should a wanderer surrender his true name beneath the moon. Transformation from errant whisper to structured cult may be charted alongside the settling of Tamriel's continents. When Aldmer first anchored crystal spires upon Somerset's shores, they carried with them the abstract memory of Padamaic kin, dangerous, yes, but not yet demonized. In their oldest hymns, scattered across sepia scrolls in the Sepura Tower, the Daedra are invoked as cousins of change, neither fell nor holy, but elemental truths cast beyond the lattice of Arnuel's governance. That neutrality would erode only after the schism sparked by Lorcan, whose trickery birthed mortality's sorrow and seeded distrust among the old Aelnofi. The Aedra, complicit by exhaustion, became objects of pity and veneration. The Daedra, aloof and entire, slipped conveniently into the role of corrupter. During this conceptual pivot, the princes themselves remained indifferent to moral labels. Nocturnal, veiled in perpetual gloaming, cared little whether mortal lips named her mistress of shadows or thief of the final moment. The appellations were masks thrown upon an ever-shifting face, yet the masks themselves gained power in mortal discourse. Once men of the North ascribed dread dominion to Molag Bal as father of vampires, he leaned into that niche, weaving sanguine hunger through new strains of undeath. Causality became reciprocal, mortals defined a sphere, and the prince clarified its expression, which further informed mortal belief. This feedback loop tightened with each passing epoch until the very languages of Tamriel encoded prince and sphere as immutable pairs. While mortal sentiment evolved, Oblivion experienced its own internal tectonics. Realms jockeyed for metaphysical adjacency. Rumors suggest that Hircine, Hyacine, hunted through pocket wildernesses torn from lesser Daedra's gardens, grafting them onto his Everglade. Bothiah's domain, a shifting labyrinth of test and torment, is said to have once brushed the silver coasts of Meridia, sparking a radiant border war recorded only in the undulating scars of cosmic driftwood that wash ashore in Apocrypha. Such conflicts rarely bleed into Mundus, but when they do, their tremors echo as prophecy. Scholars point to the Dragon Breaks, those impossible nodes where timeline fractures overlap, as evidence that Daedric rivalries can ripple outward, instrumenting dissonance in the mortal symphony. A particularly instructive episode concerns the so-called Deal of Aramcal, preserved on shattered moonstone steels hidden beneath the royal palace of Sentinel. The text recounts a Dawn-era conclave where Malakath, petitioned the other princes for recognition after his transformation from Trinimac. The meeting, held upon a floating shard of null geometry, devolved into 200 years of argument, or 2 minutes. Sources differ regarding whether strength forged by betrayal equaled inherent sovereignty. Eventually, Azura decreed that the Orc-Father be seated among them as patron of the spurned. Though largely symbolic to immortal eyes, the decision sent shockwaves through future cosmology. It sanctified the Orsimer's place in myth, anchoring their cultural identity to Malakath's plane of Ashbit and wreathing each chieftain's oath in volcanic cinders. In the slow fermentation of mortal memory, events like Aramcal blurred into legend. Yet every scrap of testimony underscores the same principle: Daedra act according to inward momentum, not external moral calculus. Their spheres are not chosen as mortals choose trades, they are organic emanations of being. To understand Mehrunes Dagon's thirst for raising towers is to comprehend the prince himself, for the tower and the hammer are one state uncoiling. This point is elegantly phrased in the Orange Book of Riffin, where an anonymous Dunmer scribe writes, "A prince cannot err, for his desire is law to his realm. The only wrongness lies in our expectation of restraint." Nevertheless, expectation is a potent shaping force. When the Alessian doctrines swept Cyrodiil, labeling the Daedra as 12-fold enemies, the doctrinarians omitted several princes for convenience. Cultural fear coagulated into mimetic sigils potent enough to warp how mortal minds interfaced with the void. During this period, recorded Daedric visitations plummeted. Some theologians argue that the doctrine's condemnation erected an ideological bulwark, narrowing the veil and depriving princes of imaginative footholds. Others suggest the princes simply grew bored, retreating until mortal defiance ripened into curiosity once more. Regardless, the interplay between belief and manifestation strengthened the bond between sphere and story, laying groundwork for later cataclysms wherein princes would leverage inherited myth as siege engines. While elves and men tussled over doctrinal nuance, deeper metaphysical currents brewed. The eldest texts of the Sigic Endeavor speak of the dreaming sleeve, a metaphoric route through which consciousness may step outside linear confines to glimpse Amaranth, the state of total self-authorship. These teachings note, almost casually, that several Daedric princes appear through the sleeve as invasive sigils, attempting to coax travelers into bargain or bondage. Whether the princes perceive Amaranth as threat, opportunity, or simple novelty remains opaque. What is clear is that even in the secret corridors of thought, the Daedra are present, reflecting the cosmic truth that no boundary, mental or material, is wholly inviolable. One might ask then, though rhetorical queries are best kept silent, why the Aedra permit such intrusions. The answer lies in the architecture of Mundus. Lorcan's scheme required tension, the interplay between stasis and change, permanence and possibility. The Daedra, by existing outside the world, supply an unending vector of unpredictability. They test the lattice, they catalyze evolution, they offer mortals avenues to power unmediated by the slow grace of the divines entrenched within the world's foundations. In a paradoxical sense, they complete the equation of the Mundus even as they reject it. Remove the Daedra, and the mortal realm might ossify into perfect, lifeless order, the dream of stagnant Nerns spoken of in half-burnt Falmery charts. Thus, though the princes are feared, they are also necessary. This truth underpins the philosophies of those who practice balanced veneration, Bosmery spinners invoking Azura to spin history's tapestry, or Orsama mystics beseeching Malakath for fires that temper grief into resolve. In each case, the worshipper acknowledges danger yet proceeds, valuing agency over unchallenged safety. As the Sijic axiom goes, only in tension may a soul find purchase. By the close of the Dawn era, when chronology finally congealed into the measured reigns of the Merethic epochs, the relationship between Daedra and mortals had matured into wary coexistence. Oblivion's princes, now secure in their individuated realms, turned their attention toward cultivating influence, each according to nature. Meridia, estranged from her Padamaic siblings by an inexplicable fascination with ordered light, seeded pockets of luminescent coral in the deep seas of Tamriel, hopping to coax new life that might one day gaze skyward in worship. Veamina, weaving nightmares within her quagmire, began seeding prophetic terrors that foretold calamities centuries in advance, her motives hidden behind a calm mask of indigo mist. Even princes of seeming benevolence, like Meridia, carried motives beyond mortal judgment. Each gesture served to expand a conceptual domain, the way roots infiltrate stone not by force, but by persistence. Meanwhile, the mortal races solidified myth into liturgy. The Chima, led by the prophet Veloth under guiding stars of Azura, Bothiah, and Mephala, migrated eastward, forging a culture where worship of these good Daedra coexisted with stern reverence for living gods yet unborn. The Altmer codified their dragon crown laws, forbidding Daedric communion except under sanctioned lunar alignments. In the north, Proto-Nordic shamans bargained with Hermamora for totems of shout-born power that would eventually fuel the tyranny of the dragon cult. Each civilization conversed with the princes through the grammar of its own fears and ambitions, and the responses from oblivion molded cultures as surely as rivers sculpt valleys. Amidst this growing complexity, loci of power artifacts emerged as crystallized moments of covenant. Mehrunes razor, conjured from the cinders of a forgotten pact. The skeleton key, an ever-shifting lockpick whispered into Mundus by Nocturnal. Dawnbreaker, a blade of Meridia forged from a stray sunbeam that pierced the void at dawn's first gasp. Artifacts formed a triangulation linking mortal will, Daedric intent, and the mutable substance of reality. To wield such an item was to touch the prince's heart directly, yet also to be touched in return, an intimacy many did not survive intact. Historiographers often delineate the border between mythic past and historical record at the moment when mortal writing achieves consistent chronology. By that measure, the final flickers of this chapter align with the settling of the Aelid Empire and the rise of Dwemer ingenuity. Both civilizations, though contemporaneous, diverged drastically in their attitudes toward the Daedra. The Aelids, heirs to wild elf thaumaturgy, bound Daedric spirits into glass and adamant for light and terror alike. The Dwemer, skeptical of all divinity, treated princes as curiosities or obstacles, preferring to sculpt their own divine potential through tonal manipulation. In the clash between imperial Aelids and subterranean Dwemer, one glimpses the broader dialectic of Tamrielic history, whether to accept the cosmos's inherent uncertainty, personified by the Daedra, or to overcome it by forging autonomous path. Here on the cusp of tangible history, the groundwork is laid. The princes stand poised beyond the veil, each realm a mirror reflecting an aspect of possibility. Mortals, newly conscious of their autonomy, weigh the risks of engagement against the promise of untold power. The Aedra, quiet pillars in the bedrock, endure with patient silence. And between them all, the tapestry of fate stretches, threads tugged by unseen fingers from realms of midnight, fire, madness, and secret knowledge. The stage is set for covenants and crises yet to unfold, for revolutions of soul and stone shaped by the hands of those who dare reach beyond the mortal coil and touch the ever-shifting heart of oblivion. The dawn's embers receded into hidden fissures of myth, yet the Daedric princes endured, immutable in essence, but ever-shifting in visage, each a sovereign thought crystallized into godhood. Their number, though often rendered as 16 in temple glossaries, truly spans 17 if one counts the unbroken mind of Gigalag, whose destiny of order was shattered into the rime of madness. To apprehend them, the historian must set aside mortal taxonomies of virtue and vice, for a prince is neither merely spirit nor tyrant, but the pure-hearted echo of an idea. Ideas, like weather across the void, obey neither linear time nor provincial law, they breathe where they will. Thus this survey proceeds not as litany or indictment, but as the patient cataloguing of stars across an unfamiliar sky, each fixed in its own orbit, yet tugging at all others through unseen lines of influence. Azura, who is called Moonshadow and mother of the dusk and dawn, is the first light we behold upon peering into Oblivion's sea. Her sphere is transition itself, the velvet hush between diverging moments. When the sky gains its bruise-colored edge before sunrise, that faint blush is her sigh. She shaped her realm from twilight substance, twin crescents forever easing into and out of eclipse. The lustrum courts of Moonshadow smell of nocturnal lilac, and their avenues shimmer with pearlescent dust that clings to the steps of dreamers who wander too far in reverie. Her voice is prophecy, but never certainty. She speaks in the near promise of what might be, issuing omens that unfold like petals only when mortals accept the cost of crossing their own thresholds. The Dunmer recall that she remade their eyes beneath a sky of ash, gifting them the crimson lens through which they witness both gloom and radiance in equal measure. Those eyes are her covenant, to see clearly in sorrow and grace alike. When a Mer offers a whispered prayer at the moment day gives itself to night, Azura hears, and if she answers, it is with the soft rustle of wings flickering at reality's margin. From dusk's serenity we pass to Bothia, the prince of depths unknown, whose epithet among wandering scholars, prince of plots, captures only a fraction of a ceaseless hunger for becoming. Bothia devours stagnation. Nothing pleases this one more than proving strength through contest. The realm of Bothia is a living labyrinth of bronze basilicas that tilt and reform themselves in response to each challenger's resolve, forging new corridors in the heat of ambition. Those who traverse it find each hallway asks a different price. A cherished certainty surrendered, a falsehood confessed, a shard of pride bled upon flagstones that hiss with scorn. It was Bothia who, by tale or metaphor, swallowed Trinomac and spoke with the vanquished warrior's tongue, inspiring the Chimeri exodus from Somerset. In that deed is the prince's creed, outgrow your shape or perish in it. Chimera who heeded the call found themselves remade in frame and fate, a metamorphosis that continues echoing through Dunmeri ritual, wherein the brave walk on coals of their own illusions and leave charred doubts behind. If Bothia is trial by sharpened edge, Mephala, whose subtle threads weave between shadows, prefers the silent incision. Known in whispered chambers as the web spinner, Mephala claims every secret uttered to an unattended room. Her domain appears at first as a tranquil night garden glimmering with dew. Yet beneath every leaf, silken filaments tremble with rumors in transit, each delicate line connecting distant hearts in schemes neither participant fully grasps. When two daggers slide across a throat under moonlight, Mephala inhales, tasting the iron note of consequence. When lovers trade vows that will one day rupture, her silent laughter rustles the drapes. Some priests call her queen of the 8 shadows of murder, enumerating the passions that birth violent ends: jealousy, ambition, desperation, mercy, fear, honor, retribution, and nihilism. Yet she transcends enumeration. For every blow struck, there is a motive unstated, and in that ellipsis, Mephala dwells. Clavicus Vile, Clavicus Vil, is the grand bargainer of oblivion, a sharp-smiled patron of transactional desire. Mortals summon him with silver tongue and greed-strung heart, asking for cures, crowns, or charms against sorrow. His answers unfurl in ornate language too clever by half, each clause polished to mirror bright clarity until the petitioner's reflection wavers into something unrecognizable. In Vile's realm of fields of regret, alabaster colonnades wend through manicured orchards where wish-granted revelers sip ambrosial wines that never quite slake thirst. The air smells of impending applause, yet every path loops inevitably to the great courtyard where the price must be paid. A name, a lineage, a fragment of soul carefully folded and signed over. The dog of Clavicus, a sprightly familiar named Barbers, serves as both companion and conscience to his master, occasionally subverting a bargain at the last moment, for caprice delights Vile almost as much as acquisition. Beware the voice that promises everything you lacked. Its last clause is always spoken when the parchment is already aflame. Sanguine, lord of revel and release, presides over the swirling eddies of passion untethered from consequence. His realm, the myriad realms of revelry, is not a single kingdom, but an infinite banquet hall stitched from mortal fantasies, torchlit taverns where mead never sours, rose-strewn chambers where every caress arrives exactly when craved, carnival lanes whose lanterns flicker in tune to the pulse of unbridled appetite. To linger, there is to forget dawn exists, yet indulgence carries erosion. Minds loosen like laces, memories slide from fingers, until devotion to the moment eclipses duty to the self. Sanguine himself appears by many faces, fat, thin, braided, masked, but always with a goblet uplifted, inviting the next toast to temporary oblivion. Followers among Tamrelic festivals often awaken barefoot, laughter-crazed, and vaguely wiser, for excess is teacher as much as snare. When laughter dims, noctilucent mists swirl to herald Nocturnal, the ever-glowering mother of night. She claims the empty spaces between true things, shadow, silence, and the sigh a candle gives before death of flame. Her realm, Evergloam, folds upon itself like a raven's wing, corridors arching outward yet returning to the same moon-kissed courtyard where the ebon-mere pool reflects secrets never voiced. Those who gaze too deep find faces they might have worn had history bent differently. Nocturnal's sigil is the crescent curl of a raven feather, the color of unlit ink, and her artifact, the skeleton key, is rumored to open not merely doors, but narratives themselves, unlocking paths so improbable they remain invisible until chosen. Thieves of legendary acclaim often owe their impossible fortunes to a fleeting alliance with this prince, though each eventually discovers the fine print etched on their newfound destiny. Every stolen truth must one day be surrendered back to night. Vaemina, giver of ominous portents, sways the restless tides of dream. Her domain, the quagmire, shifts from tranquil field to shrieking abyss in heartbeat rhythm, mirroring the sleeper's fear of sudden waking. When her cool fingers brush a mortal brow, pleasant slumber collapses into prophetic terror, foretelling fires, betrayals, or the subtle unravel of sanity. Yet not all nightmares injure. Some awaken vigilance. In distant winter halls of Windhelm, Jarls once hired Vaemina cultists to seed recurring visions of broken walls among new-raised soldiers, believing a warrior who has already faced his city's fallen dream will fight harder to avert it. The ethics of such strategy remain contested, but Vaemina's impartiality is certain. She offers nightmare freely, and with no guarantee it will be recalled in daylight. The price is taken in unremembered screams that stain the soul faintly violet. Namira, the Lady of Decay, dwells at thresholds mortals shun. Rotting leaf beds where insects hum funeral hymns are her chapels, hollow bone her scepter. To speak her name is to invite reflection on fragility, the knowledge that every pulse is but compost's prelude. Her realm, the scuttling void, resounds with ceaseless chitter of pale horrors unseen in mortal ecologies, yet each serves a purpose in the slow artistry of decomposition. A storyteller from Calovia once wrote that Namira smells of wet stone after rain falling upon centuries of sorrow. Yet those who reverence her rarely do so out of nihilism. They seek transparency. By courting corruption, they transcend fear of it. Leper saints walk her path, wearing sores like rubies, preaching liberty and acceptance of endings. Though temple bells toll her as enemy, the quiet truth persists. Without Namira's kiss, new life would drown beneath its own refuse. Molag Bal, lord of brutal schemes, embodies domination so absolute that the victim becomes echo to his will. His realm of cold harbor mirrors Nirn in cruel parody, skis bruised, rivers sluggish with frostbit blood, every cobblestone etched by screams still trapped within. It is said Molag Bal began forging Cold Harbor after glimpsing Mundus and coveting its structure. Unable to claim the true world, he replicated it to break it continually. Across frozen plazas loom blasphemous effigies of submission, chains fused to bone. Vampires arise from his seed, not out of hunger alone, but to propagate the lesson that life, unclaimed by another, is incomplete. Scholars of the Imperial College record that when Molag Bal speaks, his words hammer upon the spine, bending it toward worship or shattering it in refusal. Yet mortal agency persists even there. Some souls steal embers of defiance from his furnaces, forging weapons that cut the very concept of enslavement. Such blades glow hot as blue comets against Cold Harbor's pallor, a testament that tyranny is never total. Where Molag Bal's chains weigh heavy, Mehrunes Dagon thunders as storm. Twin axes raised, he is cataclysm made flesh, earthquake, volcanic spume, the roar of falling towers. The Deadlands, his fief, crackle with rivers of incandescent magma winding through basalt ramparts wrought from the bones of giants. Lightning forks sideways across blood-red sky, lashing spires that lean like swords thrust into a wounded planet. To petition Dagon is to crave revolution, so fierce it erases precedent. The mythic Dawn cult learned this intimately, offering the Emperor's bloodline to breach the Father Realm, fueling the Oblivion crisis that bathed Cyrodiil in flame. Yet hidden beneath Dagon's fury lies a doctrine of renewal. When all that stood collapses, unimagined futures may germinate in ash. This grim mercy, if mercy it be, attracts zealots certain their age deserves no gentle reform, only cleansing fire. Between tyranny and cataclysm stands Meridia, lady of infinite energies, radiant exile among darker kin. Born of primal light divorced from Aetherius, she despises the turgid stillness of undeath. Her realm, the colored rooms, gleams in prismatic corridors whose angles refract beyond Euclidean grasp. Each step transposes the traveler into new wavelengths of emotion. Mortals who serve Meridia often wield lanterns or blades infused with dawn-colored fire, artifacts that burn away necrotic magicka. In the Second Era, she armed the Aelid Exile, Eumeral the Unfeathered, with sun-golded mail, proving her willingness to empower even cruel hearts if it furthers the banishment of decay. Yet her luminance is not gentle, light lashes as fiercely as flame. Those who betray her commandments find themselves cast into prisms where their sins refract into blinding echoes, each reflection stripping marrow until only the husk of remorse remains. Hermeus Mora, the ageless keeper of the forbidden, lingers in murk no lamp can pierce. Apocrypha, his domain, unfurls as libraries without end, shelves heaped with tomes bound in birch bark skin, inked by quills fashioned from sea serpent spines. The air tastes of brine and mildew. Amid shifting stacks, wretched seekers trudge, eyes scabbed by forbidden clarity. In Apocrypha, every question births two deeper labyrinths, so that satisfaction recedes like a sinking star. Mora himself arises as a tidal mass of quills and eyes, each iris dilating upon unspoken queries. To bargain with him is to accept that knowledge is never final. The further one sees, the more horizons multiply. Nordic myth recounts how Murark, first dragonborn, claimed ancient words in exchange for fealty, only to find the price compound across eras. Mora's promise is simple: uncover the hidden chart of existence and become cartographer of one's own destiny, so long as the ink runs ever deeper into soul. Malakath, once Trinimac, stands as patron of the ostracized, a jagged sentinel forged in betrayal's crucible. Ashbit, his realm, thrums with ember storms, each spark a memory of wrongs unavenged. Here battered fortresses rise from slag, crowned with trophies of shattered taboos. Orcish hymns invoke Malakath when hammers strike forges, rhythmic clamor echoing oaths of endurance. He teaches that honor blooms not from sprightly grace, but from bearing the weight of repeated scorn and standing yet unbroken. His artifact, Volendrung, exemplifies this creed, a hammer so hefty that only resolve incarnate may lift it. Legends claim Malakath will one day shatter the firmament itself, freeing those bound by fate's contempt. Whether this prophecy is literal or the fevered dream of exiled poets, the lesson persists. Strength tempered by suffering can cleave boundaries even gods once thought perpetual. Hircine Hircine, Lord of the Hunt, roves perpetual twilight forests where prey and predator trade skins by moon's decree. The hunting grounds echo with hornblasts that summon great stag spirits across silvered glades. Moonlight slants like blades through rustling canopies. Mortal hunters who enter by ritual or accident find themselves gifted or cursed, with lycanthropic forms that mirror their deepest yearning for tooth and claw. Hircine calls this the blessing, for it strips the polite veneer of civilization, letting spirit run barefoot through marrow of instinct. Once yearly, on the blood moon convergence, he gathers champions for the great hunt. Victory yields a transient seat beside the prince at a fireside of crimson embers, and defeat grants swift, honorable end. Among all princes, Hircine alone keeps covenant inviolate. The hunt is fair, the prey worthy, the chase sacred. To cheat is to be cast out into endless labyrinth where the scent of shame never fades. Sheogorath, the mad star beneath a tattered parasol, deserves caution even in mention. His domain, the Shivering Isles, is parted by the straits of a whim, mania, where colors bloom too vivid and laughter shatters glass, and dementia, where corridors coil in damp paranoia. Sheogorath's voice alternates between honeyed stage whisper and cackling bell stroke, each syllable spinning reality a quarter turn askew. His festivals include the inversion of logic, the erosion of certainty, and the cheese-wheeled eclipse of reason. Yet within madness lie revelations unspoken by sane tongues. The Dunmer scribes of Vivek's era once confessed that more than one prophet glimpsed Almsivi divinity after communion with Sheogorath's riddling laughter, a reminder that Order's map is incomplete without the wild pen strokes of chaos. Still, those who linger too long beneath his jests often find their names drifting loose like dandelion seeds, each consonant cracking until identity becomes a musing background texture. Hurriite, least in stature yet vast in consequence, herds the skeins of pestilence. He manifests as dragon of bronze-green filth, scales pitted by lesions that weep alchemic squalor. His realm, the pits, swarms with fevered souls condemned to cyclic purging by caustic fumes. There they learn discipline through sickness endured, emerging charred clean of frailty. On Nirn, plagues occasionally scrawl Hurriite's sigil in populous margins. Alchemists whisper prayers while brewing antidotes, acknowledging pestilence as both destroyer and tutor of resilience. In the summer of pestled Columbine, Breton gardeners sometimes leave a saucer of vinegar in greenhouse shadows, honoring the prince so that his mischief remains instructional, not terminal. Thus Hurriite's role reveals itself, balance through adversity, immunity by ordeal. Jiggalag, once High Lord of Order, stands aloof from his brothers and sisters, bound in mythic cadence of betrayal. In eons past, his perfect logic threatened to regiment oblivion into crystal lattices, extinguishing creative vagary each prince cherishes. In dread alliance, they cursed Jiggalag to fragment, birthing the jester thing Sheogorath as prison of irony. Only during the Greymark does Jiggalag stride forth, silver armor resplendent, to tear asunder the isles he cannot rule for long. When the cycle completes, he splinters once again into laughing storm. Scholars debate whether his momentary sovereignty is tragedy or mercy. Tragedy, because order glimpsed then lost, is torment. Mercy, because absence of perpetual tyranny shelters potential. Some daring Artium sages suggest a far future where Jiggalag might break the curse entirely. Yet what becomes of possibility in perfect grid is question left respectfully unanswered. To speak of the princes individually is insufficient. We must attend to the metaphysical law that shapes their interplay. Each prince embodies a fundamental principle, and their mutual existence forms a lattice of complementary tensions. Light cannot cast silhouette without shadow, dominion cannot tighten shackles without rebellion sharpening blades. This relational geometry is codified in the doctrine of the seventh side, a Sijic treatise asserting that for any concept realized in Mundus, a Daedric sovereign both guards and challenges its expression. The doctrine warns against simplistic alignment. Azura may comfort, but also wound with truth. Mehrunes may destroy, but also clear fertile ground. Mortals err when they name princes purely good or evil. The correct calibration is usefulness to a circumstance. Such nuance governs the summoning practices of hedge mages and university thaumaturges alike. A conjurer approaching Bothia for martial insight must frame the invocation as contest, an arena of willpower, lest the prince deem the offer unworthy and answer with contemptuous silence. Likewise, praying to Meridia for healing demands the petitioner cast aside secrecy. Her light abhors hidden guilt. Each sphere responds only to tokens resonant with its own frequency. The Sijic sage Neruhan enumerated these correspondences in his lost book of dissonant harmonics, an apocryphon describing how a single misplaced intonation could invert intent, drawing sanguine instead of Mara, Veamina instead of Giuliano's. Copies survive only in fragments, but their caution remains. Oblivion hears precisely. A deeper law concerns the mantle and the mirror. When mortal devotion reaches fever pitch, belief itself can warp into god shape, birthing minor Daedra called shades, imps, or dremora that mimic their sovereign's aspect. These servitors are not children, but reflections, as moonlight upon water. They maintain their prince's conceptual integrity by expressing core traits across infinite microcosms. This explains why a dremora foot soldier arrayed beneath Mehrunes, Dagon carries within him the same insatiable appetite for upheaval that drives his lord, albeit scaled to the burning of a single village rather than an empire. By fractal propagation, the prince's sphere remains consistent even when the prince's mind roams other frontiers. Opposition between spheres occasionally escalates into Daedric war, though few such conflicts pierce Nirn's sky in full measure. When they do, mortals witness wonders and calamities beyond comprehension. Consider the Bloodwater Fissure, wherein Meridia's Aurorans clashed with Molag Bal's harvesters across the riven substrata of Cold Harbor. Lances of photonic glass impaled shadow-wrought titans. Screams froze into crystal stalactites that still hum dirges audible only to moth priests. The battle concluded when Meridia withdrew, not in defeat, but in disdain for how far her light had fallen into cruelty. Such wars leave scars in the macrocosm, anomalous auroras, phantom earthquakes, sudden epidemics of prophetic dreaming. Mortal scholars reading these signs might craft new cults or abandon old ones, feeding a feedback loop that either heals the wound or deepens it. Yet despite their grandeur, princes are not immutable. They are shaped subtly by the stories mortals circulate. Sermons preached in Kvatch against Sanguine's debauchery may be forgotten within a year, but repeated across generations, they coalesce into cultural lens, narrowing the range of reverie possible within that province, and thus weakening the resonance that calls Sanguine's gaze. Conversely, a single epic poem glorifying Hirsane's purity of hunt, if recited around fires for centuries, may open wide corridors for his howling sons to stride. In this sense, every bard, priest, and bedtime storyteller participates in an endless referendum on which divine impulses deserve louder echoes. Cultic artifacts record the tangible votes of bygone ages. The ebony blade, forged by Mephala from murder's naked shame, lengthens with each betrayal inflicted by its bearer, as though gossip itself grows heavier over time. Azura's star, perfect in symmetry, remains unspoiled so long as usage heeds its twilight covenant. Should it be filled with soul in cruelty, its glow dims, cracking star glass, not by Azura's direct action, but by dissonant resonance. The artifact thus becomes a moral seismograph, reflecting the harmony or discord of mortal intention with Prince's sphere. In traversing these realities, the scholar must remember that Daedric princes, though vast, are not omniscient. Their perception focuses where thought invests. A peasant lighting incense to Molag Bal in secret cellar may gain the same intimate notice as an emperor erecting a cathedral of bone. What matters is the congruence of desire with principle. This is why an isolated hermit, dreaming fevered geometry upon an uncharted mountaintop, can inadvertently summon Hermias Mora's regard, whereas a collegiate convocation reciting precise formulas but lacking true thirst for hidden truth will find only stale silence. The Imperial Library's Black Book of Alessia records a seldom-taught maxim: invoke not the name but the need. Within that riddle lies pragmatic survival. When famine stalks Coluvian valleys, farmers sometimes appeal to Periite, conceding short plague among cattle in exchange for disease-resistant grain. The cost measured against potential ruin appears sensible, though abbots in Chorol lament such compacts. Call them heresy, call them negotiation. They reveal the continuum of mortal agency. For the princes do not coerce worship. Coercion belongs to tyrants of flesh, but beckon, tempting each soul with a mirror of feared or coveted possibility. Acceptance or refusal defines a society as keenly as its laws. Thus Tamriel's mosaic of faiths persists in fractal complexity. Dunmer split their reverence between tribunal saints and the good Daedra, believing tension between old teacher and living God fosters humility. Khajiiti sages map lunar phases to changing aspects of Azura, Meridia, and others, weaving a theology where Daedra and Idra switch masks beneath twin moons. Nordic skalds recount Molag Bal's forging of vampire king Lami Bal, yet in the same breath, they toast Hircine as honored adversary in the hunt. Contradiction does not disrupt truth, it illuminates the multi-angled gem of existence. The princes remain standing stones upon which each culture carves its anxieties and aspirations. Toward twilight of this chapter, we cast brief gaze upon future horizons. The Aelid Empire fades in torchlit corridors, Dwemer anvils ring with impossible alloys, men of Alessia stir under dragon thrall, each event influenced, if obliquely, by Daedric undertones. Every rebellion or renaissance draws subtle counsel from spheres beyond. Azura whispers to Nerevar beneath red mountain winds, Meridia readies prisms against undead kings, Dagon dreams of towers crumbling like sand. These movements gather momentum across centuries until crisis blossoms and a new age is named. Yet beneath names, principles abide, twilight and plot, bargain and breath, shadow and hunt, order and mania, each balancing creation as an unseen hand upon cosmic scales. The scholar closes his codex, ink still damp, aware that the survey remains incomplete, for to finish would imply a terminus, and no terminus exists while mortal minds imagine possibilities. So long as a child wonders what lurks beyond night's veil, Azura's stars will glitter. So long as an outcast steals resolve against mockery's sting, Malakath stands sentinel. So long as lovers dance beneath unchained moons, Sanguine hums a languid chord. The Daedric princes are not distant curiosities, but reflections of the secret dialogues unfolding in every beating heart. To know them is to know the shifting architecture of desire and dread that binds all stories together, an unending tapestry woven from dusk's sigh to dawn's reluctant hush. Beyond the tapestry's mortal threads lies the boundless skein of oblivion itself, a mosaic of spheres stitched together by the private longings of princes. Each realm is an echo of a single immortal thought made fertile, yet no two echoes share harmony. Their borders drift like smoke, sometimes kissing, sometimes rending apart in lightning ruptures that mortals mistake for shooting stars. To step into one of these dominions is to walk directly into the temper of its ruler, for landscape and psychology are inseparable. Stone quivers at the twitch of divine memory, skis brighten or blacken according to the prince's whim. Thus, any cataloguing of realms must proceed with humility, for what is mapped today may revolve into altogether different topography by the next inhalation of cosmic wind. Yet certain anchor patterns persist, favored vistas, signature forces, and recurring metaphysical laws. It is these semi-stable elements the scholar now dares to describe, not as cartographer, but as cautious witness. The traveler who passes first through Azura's gate finds herself swallowed by a hush of deep lilac light. This is Moonshadow, a domain perpetually poised between births of star and sigh of sunset. No horizon exists. Instead, Gradations of violet slip seamlessly into one another, giving the illusion of endless dawn or dusk. Trees, if the crystalline spires that line the avenues may still be called trees, bear leaves of prismatic glass that chime when stirred by invisible breeze. Each chime releases motes of memory, laughter, regrets, whispered vows that drift upward and become new constellations in the Empyrean dome. A mortal trespasser will sense no heat or chill, yet her heartbeat will slow to mirror the languid pulse of twilight itself. Time pales in purpose, decisions feel reversible. It is here that Azura delivers visions, each couched as delicate paradox. Every prophecy glimpsed reveals an outcome dependent on choices still unmade. Scholars debate whether Moonshadow's atmosphere sedates ambition by design, encouraging contemplative humility before fate's branching promise. What is certain is the realm's leniency. Few perish outright. Most awaken on Nirn a night later with sand-soft dreams in their hair and a lingering taste of starlight behind the teeth. Travel northward in abstract direction. There is no real cardinal axis in Oblivion, and the gentle hues of Moonshadow peel away to reveal corridors of absolute black. You have entered Evergloam, Nocturnal's stronghold, a realm that might be infinite shadow folded around a single silver pool. One moves by intuition rather than sight. Footfalls make no sound, torches sputter silent. Orientation follows emotion. The anxious inevitably circle back to their own echo, while the calm slip, unseen, between curtains of darkness into secret gardens where alabaster statues hold puckered keys in place of hearts. Some vaults lead to the fabled Ebonmere, surface as dark as obsidian, but reflecting truths the viewer has not yet admitted. Here the fabled skeleton key is rumored to originate, conjured anew whenever fate requires a lock to make or unmake legend. Yet Evergloam is no resting sanctuary. Spectral ravens patrol every path, their wingbeats ruffling the realm like pages in a clandestine tome. Trespassers who attempt theft find the shadows congeal around wrists and throat, dragging them downward into oubliettes where even thought casts no reflection. Stories claim the infamous master thief, Avra Nivelle, became prisoner of his own secrets here, transformed into a living shade, tasked with cataloging every whispered confession stolen in his mortal career. Adjacent by whispered rumor rather than measurable space lies the web of Mephala, a labyrinthine domain sometimes named Spiral Skein or Ten Strings. Its macrostructure resembles an impossibly huge spiderweb stretching between ivory pylons that hurtle through void. Each filament is a corridor, each node, a chamber where intrigues manifest as tangible events repeating like plays. One chamber reenacts a betrayal between lovers, another, the double assassination of rival warlords, a third, the founding meeting of a clandestine guild whose members are simultaneously living and dead. Visitors drawn along threads feel compulsion to adopt roles in these dramas, unaware that performance feeds the realm's growth. To resist is to feel the web tighten, microscopic silk slicing flesh with artisan patience. The only safe egress is to cut one's own thread, severing memory of motives before Mephala can spin it into fresh design. For this reason, Psijic monks attempting ethereal reconnaissance carry obsidian knives honed not for combat, but for cutting away newly attaching strands of narrative before returning to Mundus bereft of dangerous secrets. As intrigue gives way to clamor, the traveler might next sense vibrations through the void, thunderous clangs resolving into martial chants. This heralds proximity to the copper citadels of Bothia, which float within a roiling red miasma often misidentified as sky. Bridges of serrated bronze connect arenas the size of cities. Sands here transform at will into molten glass, searing those who falter. Combatants appear and vanish mid-swing, summoned from dreams of ambition across eternal now. Each victory carves a glowing rune into the victor's skin. Each defeat melts ambition into slag beneath the arena floor. Mortals who endure 99 consecutive duels without succumbing are said to ascend a spire where Bothia herself reclines upon a throne forged from dissolved pretenders. There, a single whisper from the prince can detonate lifetimes of complacency. Though few return, those who do emanate unsettling calm, as though their every moment has already been tested by perfect adversity. Far from clamor, and low as decay may sink, waits Namira's scuttling void. Entry feels like falling sideways, landing upon a plane of faintly luminescent fungi that pulse in rhythm with subterranean worms. Gravity is uncertain. Sometimes it invites descent through membranous floors into catacombs of slick bone. Other times, it releases explorers upward into vaults where rot drips from stalactites, yet never reaches ground. Here the air is rich with the scent of fermentation, cheese gone blue, cider long turned. Strange beauty lurks within, flowers woven from mold that burst into cobalt spores forming constellations among cavern lumens. A mortal who inhales deeply experiences not poison but radical acceptance, perceiving grand cycles wherein even mountains crumble into soil to nourish newborn peaks. Yet scuttling void is no meditative retreat. Entities called Pale Guardians patrol, towering heaps of amalgamated carrion bound by black moss sinew. They shepherd any who tarry too long toward charnel pits, said to ferment souls until individuality dissolves into universal compost, pleasing Namira's philosophy of inevitable dissolution. Far more hostile to mortal biology is Puryeite's pits, an arrangement of concentric trenches carved into metallic stone that seeps acid. The atmosphere flickers green-gold, heavy with spores that corrode iron into flaky dust, yet spare the skin just enough to prolong agony. Rivers of boiling effluvium course through sluice gates, controlled by clockwork valves of dwarven craft, spoils won by Puryeite during some forgotten calculus of contagion. Each valve, turning reconfigures local ecosystems, redistributing plagues like a grand laboratory. Mortals conscripted here, often worshippers seeking immunity, are herded through gauntlets of illness, searing fever plains, labyrinths of hallucinogenic fumes, fields where crystalline mites crawl into thoughts and lay eggs of doubt. Those who survive full circuit stagger out bearing ciphers etched across lungs, undecoded formulas that can brew antidotes to subsequent maladies. Few choose to linger, but some do, embracing the role of caretaker alchemist, convinced that suffering may sculpt superior forms of resilience. A harsher lesson awaits in Coldharbour, Molag Bal's dread mirror of Nirn. The realm greets travelers with bone-colored snow swirling across ebon sky. On each horizon loom silhouettes of familiar cities twisted into necrotic parody, a broken white gold tower leaking frostfire, a windhelm recast from rime-bitten iron, a Vivek city strung upside down over pits of frozen bile. Roads are paved with mortals' regrets, literalized into black iron plates that vibrate, forcing the listener to relive memories of submission and shame on endless loop. Chains known as soulrigs dangle from levitating citadels, siphoning latent defiance from captives to power furnaces at realm's core. Within these forges, Bal's artisans craft vampiric rune blades whose thirst extends beyond blood into sovereignty of will. Liberation is theoretically possible. The rebellious spark, a blue-white ember glimpsed by seers, hides somewhere in the labyrinth. It is said that single flicker can ignite hope strong enough to unbind chains across entire sectors of Coldharbour, yet the ember moves unpredictably, as if propelled by heroism's rumor. Many quests have ended in silence beneath iron snowfall, but rumor sustains rebellion's possibility and Bal's perpetual vigilance. From frozen tyranny to searing apocalypse, the path curves abruptly into the deadlands of Mehrunes Dagon. Here landmasses drift on magma seas like shattered continents of shale, colliding with thunderous splashes that birth towers of obsidian glass. Lightning crackles horizontally, splitting mountains whose interiors reveal hissing cavities sculpted into torture shrines. The sky is a mouth of embers, each breath tastes of scorched brass. Yet to call the Deadlands mere wasteland is misapprehension. Seedlings of crimson crystals sprout in ash fields, absorbing chaos and blooming into improbable flora, spiked blooms that hum litanies of upheaval. These crystals serve as tuning forks for Dagon's next assault on constraint, storing explosive change until a mortal sets foot near, triggering detonation that rearranges local terrain into new permutations of hazard. The realm's inhabitants, Dremora clans such as the Kin, maintain war camps along volcanic ridges, eternally drilling for invasion. Their discipline contradicts popular vision of indiscriminate ruin. The Kin practice meticulous calculus, believing each incursion must topple a cultural pillar to maximize unraveling of stasis. Thus, the Deadlands operate as both crucible and blueprint for catastrophe. Turning from firestorm to shifting radiance, the colored rooms of Meridia burst upon the senses like sunrise refracted through diamond. Gravity flows in vectors determined by chromatic chords. Walk a line of cerulean, and you drift sideways into vaulted amphitheaters where choirs of light sing notes that sculpt architecture mid-aria. Towers resemble prisms grown from bedrock, their facets spiraling to collect stray motes of cosmic luminescence. Rivers of liquid daylight cut through meadows of golden grass that hum with photosynthetic psalms. Wraith-like aurorans glide above, cloaked in photonic armor, wielding blades of solid dawn. Undead creatures cannot exist here. Necrotic tissue shatters beneath the realm's frequency like glass under soprano. Mortals suffering from disease or vampirism feel their afflictions flare painfully as Meridia's energies reject imbalance. Yet those aligned with purposeful creation, healers, gardeners, architects, may find their crafts flourish at impossible speed. Halls built in minutes, seeds sprouting into fruit-bearing orchards within an hour, poems condensing into perfect gem-like stanzas simply by being spoken aloud beneath the triple suns that orbit overhead. If light wearies the seeker, a corner of infinite shelves beckons, Apocrypha, Hermias Mora's abyssal library, suspended in perpetual gloom lit by faint green shimmer of luminous ink. Cyclopean stacks spiral downward into oily seas where tentacled guardians patrol the Stygian depths. Each tome whispers potential calamities, offering glimpses at hidden equations that underpin existence. The songline mapping lunar beast tides, the reversible sigil that collapses dragon souls into crystal, the final riddle of Chim. But knowledge costs shape. Readers linger until eyes burn from within, replaced by clusters of black pearls able to witness multiple timelines, at once yet incapable of forgetting any horror glimpsed. Staircases sometimes rearrange mid-climb, channeling visitors into scriptoriums where scribe crows, avian Daedra with quills for beaks, demand copy of memory in trade for exit path. Some comply, leaving fragments of themselves bound in vellum. Others refuse, wandering deeper among paradox corridors until identity codifies into footnote within indexes found only by seekers doomed to repeat the pattern. Echoing Apocrypha's menace, but tuned to primal instincts, is the hunting grounds of Hircine. The threshold appears as birch archway woven with sinew. Beyond lies an evergreen wilderness bathed in permanent pre-dawn light, dew sparkling on ferns like fireflies caught inside droplets. One hears distant howls that braid exhilaration with dread. Physics shift to honor pursuit. Pursuers' leaps lengthen in proportion to resolve. Prey's strides quicken by desperation. Wounds close faster than in Mundus, only to reopen should cowardice taint the battle. At appointed intervals, Hircine's horn bellows, freezing all combatants mid-motion. In that pause, he chooses whether to swap roles, forcing hunter to become hunted, thereby teaching empathy through terror. Mortals who master both positions earn chance to dine beside the prince at a lodge wrought from antlers the size of galleys. There they speak not with words, but with displays of trophy scars, each mark recounting epic chase. When a mortal finally falls in the grounds, soul does not dissipate, but rejoins the infinite cycle, reborn as beast, then hunter, then beast again, until essence polishes into pure, impartial fervor for contest. Southward, if directional metaphors still hold, Ashpit roars like furnace throat. Malakath's realm towers in layers. Lowest plains of black sand swirl around slag heaps where orcish spirits hammer Dumayan into broad-bladed tabars. Mid-level terraces host cauldrons of liquid copper where grievances are cast to bubble away weakness. Uppermost plateaus split by molten chasms support skeletal fortresses whose battlements bristle with rusted pikes. Ashfall blizzards scald rather than freeze, yet orcish petitioners stand bare-chested in defiance, forging armor from their own resolve. Malakath himself often appears atop colossal anvil, sparks spraying skyward like meteors as he tempers conceptual alloys, honor fused with rage, loyalty folded into self-sufficiency. Rumors claim he occasionally extracts visitors from Cold Harbor's soul-rigged chains, transporting them here to learn defiance. Yet no liberation goes unpaid. Each freed captive must forge a blade containing memory of humiliation, then wield it on mortal plane to champion outcasts everywhere. Clavicus Vile's fields of regret offer dazzling contrast. Green hills ripple under pleasant sun, cherry groves perfume air, copper fountains gurgle melodic. Pavilions embroidered with silk host endless feasts where minstrels sing tributes to newfound prosperity. At first glance one might think Etherian, but each gilded goblet, each silken thread, each melodic chord represents a bargain's clause, and the gossamer ambience hides razor wire. Guests wear masks shaped by ambitions granted, a duke's visage frozen in satisfied grin, a peasant's in awestruck delight. Remove the mask and flesh cracks for want of original face. At Realm's heart stands Vile's manse, doors forever ajar except when closed in negotiation. Barbers in dog shape, lounges outside, occasionally nudging overwhelmed petitioners away, his mournful eyes hinting caution even as tail wags. Some visitors find loopholes to renegotiate dissatisfaction, others accept pastoral eternity, more cast aside gifts, choosing ruin rather than gilded bondage. Yet even those who escape carry intangible debt, luck curdles at inopportune moments, or friendships fade into polite indifference, as though happiness once outsourced cannot be reclaimed without deficit. Sanguine's myriad realms of revelry curl loosely around Clavicus's fields like riotous border party. Entry can occur through moments of fatal merriment, a cork popped too vigorously, a kiss exchanged at midnight crossroads, a gambler's final throw. Suddenly the reveler stands beneath velvet canopy draped across star-spangled courtyard where dancers spin with abandon, their footsteps sparking iridescent confetti that dissipates into balmy air. Each subrealm styles itself after particular vice. There is the Orchard of Lips, perfumed by fermented cherries so sweet memory liquefies, the Gilded Menagerie, where illusions allow participants to embody dream forms, the Vat Rooms, where rivers of wine flow upward, forcing drinkers to swim through intoxication. Sanguine appears unpredictably, altering his visage to match the crowd's mood. Corpulent satyr, sly jester, pale goddess with flaring hair like autumn leaves. Exit is permitted, but not enforced. Time outside continues normally for some, scarcely at all for others. Many who return speak with languid subtlety, their laughter pleasant yet edged with sorrow born of pleasures that no mortal dawn will ever equal again. Among all realms, none mirrors the volatility of consciousness like the Shivering Isles, Sheogorath's divided estate. A visitor appears on a stone causeway flanked by golden saints on one side, dark seducers on the other, each statue alive in potential. Forward lies the gatekeeper, a stitched colossus whose eye sockets glow with chaotic moons. Beyond the gate, land splits into mania and dementia. Mania bursts with hypersaturation. Fields of multicolored grass rustle with delirious giggles, mushrooms tower like polka-dotted umbrellas, waterfalls cascade upward as though time forgot to anchor gravity. Flowers recite limericks in thick altmary accents until plucked, whereupon they scream in heartbreak, then wilt into candy dust. Dementia, by contrast, broods under bruised sky, willows drip black sap, fenlights hover over moats riddled by unseen predators, villages of crooked timber house, paranoid inhabitants whose whispers shape weather. Pathways warp between regions unpredictably, ensuring the wanderer never grows too accustomed to either euphoria or dread. Sheogorath himself might materialize at tea party held on ceiling or at funeral where corpse applauds attendance. Insanity is both climate and currency. Logic missteps result in metamorphosis. Speak a contradiction aloud and one's tongue may bloom into swarm of butterflies. Yet occasional order intrudes. During the grey mark, skis blanch silver and crystalline nights march to erase all whim before Jiggalag strides through, his boots calcifying rivers into mirrored highways. Then, as quickly as order triumphs, curse resets, and madness grows anew from cracks in perfect symmetry. Not all realms encompass continents. Some hide within artifacts, ideas, or even recesses of other planes. The myriad pockets of oubliette, attributed to Veamina, manifest as nightmare chambers nested within mortal dreams. Each pocket collects worst-case scenarios of a given psyche, forging them into ever-escalating gauntlet. Defeat grants awakening, surrender loops terror. Scholars propose the existence of at least 9 layers of quagmire, each deeper than last night's dream permitted. Meanwhile, Meridia's solar antechamber floats as mobile annex to colored rooms, docking temporarily above necromancer layers to siphon illicit energies. Periite maintains microrealms within Mundus itself, swirling just beneath swamp surfaces where boils erupt in patterns reminiscent of his dragon sigil. Transversal methods between these realms vary. Standard conjuration opens small apertures, sigils chalked upon marble floors, bone dust keyed to Prince's harmonic voiceprint. Larger gates require anchor stones, sigil stones grown in tower nurseries of the Deadlands or black crystals birthed in Cold Harbor's soul forges. The plane meld attempted by Molag Bal in the Second Era used dark anchor chains hammered from void steel to forcibly stitch Nirn's fabric into Cold Harbor's lattice, proving that with sufficient leverage, even Mundus can be dragged across the threshold. Countermeasures developed by Mages Guild rested upon inverse resonance, chanting constellational hymns to weaken anchor harmonics, severing links with dawn-blessed fire harvested from Meridia's prisms. Thus, interplay of realms is dynamic arms race, each prince expanding influence while Nirn's defenders improvise metaphysical cordons. Yet even cordons fray, places on Nirn where veil thins remain contested. At Shade Perilous, a pocket of dark glamour near Chorol, columns of rosy glass occasionally manifest Mephala's filaments, capturing stray travelers. The Crassus Annex beneath College of Winterhold House's portal arch, once tuned to Apocrypha, scholars guard it with rotating riddles to deter novices from wandering into Mora's Archivium. And in Valenwood's heart, there grows a hollow Gratoke whispering with voices of sanguine satyrs, a living nexus that breathes revelry spores into annual wild hunt rituals. Each tier in Vale is both hazard and opportunity, fueling commerce of rare reagents culled from oblivion. Cold Harbor steel sought by vampire kings, Ashpit ember used by orcish blacksmiths, Mania blossom distilled into antipsychotic elixirs by Altmary alchemists. Thus realms seep into worldly economies, forging bonds that theoretical law cannot wholly sever. Cultural responses differ widely. The Altmary sapiarchs codify planar taxonomy, issuing permits for limited traversal by certified arcanists. The Dunmer Ashlanders treat journey into good Daedra realms as sacred pilgrimage, aligning spiritual destiny with ancestral guidance. Khajiiti moon bishops describe Oblivion realms as facets of Joan and Jode's dreaming whiskers, maintaining elaborate lunar charts to predict portal bloom. Nord tongues seldom trust planar gates, viewing them as cheetahs' roads circumventing honorable travel, though certain shield maidens trained to raid Deadlands for ember or needed to temper axes worthy against dragons. Each response shapes subsequent incursions. Realms resonate with collective expectation, adjusting difficulty or seduction to better match cultural psyche. Amid this constant flux, one principle emerges. Realms are not merely places, but dialogues. They converse with visitors through altered gravity, hallucinatory weather, sentient architecture. Mortals who listen may glean insights into Prince's essence. Those who impose will upon environment risk rewriting themselves to fit the realm's grammar. A necromancer forging bone golems in Meridia's colored rooms finds corpse of flesh liquefy into golden syrup that hardens into statues of shimmering remorse. A missionary carrying beacon of Meridia into Cold Harbor might see its light flicker, refracted by hopelessness, illuminating path toward hidden refuge for enslaved souls, an unintended mercy derived from tension between contradictory principles. Observers from Sigic Order propose a unifying theorem, the resonant reciprocity principle. For any mortal impulse that aligns with a prince's sphere, Oblivion answers by adjusting local reality to amplify consequence. This principle explains why small groups of fanatics can inadvertently open titanic portals, their synchronized zeal acting as tuning fork. Conversely, collective disbelief can suffocate budding incursion, as seen during Third Era's Hearthfire Crisis, when coordinated chant of Temple Zero cult damped emergent Veheminen plague gates across Iliac Bay. Scholars caution that such metaphysics render realms partially contingent upon mortal narrative. Should Nirn ever forget a prince thoroughly, his sphere might shrink, realm curling inward, until only a seed of potential remains, dangerous, because such compressed essence could detonate upon rediscovery with redoubled fervor. For now, the realms endure in riotous plurality, each spinning to rhythm of sovereign desire and mortal myth. Moonshadow still echoes with quiet songs of possibility, Evergloam still launders secrets in starless pools, Bothia's arenas still echo with clang of self-overcoming. There is always a door ajar, a dream askew, a bargain whispered. Each realm offers mirror to inner corridors of every pilgrim's psyche, reflecting fears, hungers, aspirations in grand theatrical scale. Some who venture return as prophets, others as husks, but all carry imprint of foreign lore, a gleam of twilight in the eye, a ragged edge to laughter, a whispering echo in moments of solitude. In this way, Oblivion's cartography ceaselessly redraws itself upon the parchment of mortal hearts, ensuring the worlds within and without remain forever intertwined, forever unsettled, forever open to the next daring step across the trembling veil. The quiet hum that binds realms to mortal imagination finds its sharpest resonance in the moment of covenant, for it is there that fragile flesh dares to strike pacts with endless being. History's scrolls rarely record the first bargain in absolute terms, yet ash-stained tablets recovered from Tel Mora's under crypts hint that Protochima chiefs once traced sigils in starlight upon volcanic glass, offering blood and oat grain in exchange for whispered counsel from Mephala. What followed became template for all subsequent dealings. A mortal extends need, a prince extends means, and between them yawns an obligation that lingers far beyond the contracted deed. That echo, subtle or catastrophic, shapes dynasties, beliefs, and sometimes the very texture of land. Thus begins the chronicle of covenant and contact, a measured descent through recorded compacts and the ripples they sowed across Tamriel's troubled centuries. In structure, a Daedric pact cleaves to ritual geometry. Conjurers carve concentric glyphs whose radii match celestial harmonics, for each prince attunes to different starbeats. Azura favors circles of moon sugar dust traced beneath twilight gradients where twin moons overlap. Molag Bal demands angular chains of void steel hammered into bedrock at midnight's nadir. Incense varies too, Endal root for calm princes, bitter os tongue for wrathful. Yet the binding element is intent distilled to word. A spoken vow, when accented by soul energy, becomes a metaphysical tether that Oblivion recognizes. The vow may be simple, grant me vengeance, or layered within canticles older than the first era, but clarity of desire directs the gate's aperture. Scholars from the late Aelid period discovered this to their ruin when scribes, seeking lyrical flourish, occluded core intent with poetic excess. The resultant vortex drew not Meridia as planned but Pearlite, and the pearl towers of Delodiel sickened into miasma within a fortnight. When intent is answered, manifestation seldom mirrors mortal expectation. Consider the ebony blade, a katana-length shadow folded into steel by Mephala at the close of the Merethic. Its first bearer, a minor courtier of Daggerfall, asked merely for influence at court. Mephala, ever delighted by subtle transposition, granted a blade that absorbs the vitality of those betrayed by its edge, lengthening its thirst with each treachery. The courtier's rise proved meteoric yet brief. As cohorts fell, her own soul thinned until she could no longer distinguish self from the murmuring weapon. Centuries later, the blade resurfaced among Akaviri warlords, then within Dunmary Shrine vaults, each tenure echoing the first, power purchased through relational ruin. Chroniclers note that the blade's overall properties never change, but inflections do. After a Bosmary assassin wielded it to protect Valenwood from Colovian invasion, the parasitic whispers shifted, praising calculated sacrifice in service of greater host. Thus the artifact adapts, reflecting evolving cultural interpretations of betrayal. Where Mephala teaches through subterfuge, Azura instructs through constancy. Her star, a soul vessel of flawless crystal, passes between mages as both boon and admonition. Its capacity to store ungrazed souls, those of creatures rather than sentients, initially attracted Dwemer engineers south of Red Mountain. Kagranak's apprentices conducted illegal research, attempting to loop their own animus through the star to achieve self-reforging without divine sacrifice. The experiment splintered sect halls and roused Azura's direct intervention. She cast the star skyward, turning its facets to obsidian as warning. Velothi mystics later recovered the relic, its brilliance restored, and employed it strictly for healing. Yet in the Fourth Era, when a conjurer corrupted its lattice to harbor mortal souls, the crystal bruised black once more. Each cycle reinforces Azura's message, tools mirror intention, and misuse darkens the very instrument whereby power is drawn. Molag Bal's covenants exemplify imbalance. He offers strength by disfiguring freedom. The mace that bears his sigil first appeared during the collapse of the Balcroth Mining Consortium, a Nord settlement whose patriarch bargained for prosperity. Bal obliged, infusing a spiked cudgel with the ability to siphon vigor. Carried into skirmishes against Reach marauders, the mace bloomed with stolen life force, but the patriarch found himself shackled to Bal's will, compelled nightly toward unspeakable violence that produced no tactical advantage, only fear. When the final survivor sealed the mace within ice under Mount Tabor, Bal's laughter cracked the glacier, ensuring rediscovery by a new host centuries later. Patterns persist. Acquisition of the weapon signals personal ascendancy, followed by communal erosion. For domination, isolates ruler from ruled. Clavicus Vile's bargains unfold in more genteel chambers. The mask, a smiling visage hammered from bronze and bound to Barbaz's good-natured meddling, embodies Vile's fondness for social leverage. Promises offered through the mask focus on charisma. Suitors win hearts, merchants secure deals, diplomats quiet wars. Yet each outcome conceals subtle twist. The famous Redguard Envy Xa Cholan wore the mask to negotiate peace between Hammerfell and Sentinel's disaffected Yakutan colonies. Peace arrived, but Xa Cholan's genuine features faded beneath bronze pallor, dooming him to roam bizarre alleys unrecognized by kin. In Vile's economy, the satisfaction of wish subtracts authenticity. One gains what was wanted while losing the self that desired it. Sanguine's rose, by contrast, appears harmless, a graceful bloom at the stalk of a silver ash cane. Its wielder can summon demonic revelers for brief exploits of indulgence. Tavern archives list countless pranks, a troupe of satyrs materializing during Count Valga's inauguration, transforming ceremony into bawdy farce, an impromptu masquerade erupting inside Temple of Akatosh, scattering choir boys into wine vats. Laughter masks aftermath, property destroyed, vows broken, some hearts awakened to liberating impulse, others long scarred by shame. Each event feeds Sanguine's thesis that restraint is illusion, yet return of dignity often follows. Those humiliated occasionally unearth new humility, forging empathy, proving that even wild revel serves unpredictable growth. In this manner, Sanguine's gifts fluctuate like fever, burning hot, then leaving body renewed if scarred. Sheogorath dispenses chaos through Wabajak, a rod carved from branch of tangled madness tree. Fables recount its first flourish on battlefield outside Rivercrest, where sorcerer Talim transformed charging cavalry into flock of doves mid-gallop. Metal became feather, war cries cooed, and ensuing stillness birthed spontaneous truce. Subsequent wielders produced fireplaces, storms of sweet rolls, or serene explosions of butterflies that devoured memory. Predictability lies only in unpredictability. Wabajak forces observer to relinquish narrative control. Academics hypothesize that long-term exposure softens rigid cognition, encouraging creativity. Of course, it has also turned inquisitors into cheese wheels during heresy trials. Outcome remains coins spun by Sheogorath's fickle thumb, but even coins' chaos fosters reflection upon complacency of order. Meridia prefers direct interference. Her beacon, a prism of concentrated dawnfire, appears unbidden in hesitant palms, urging carriers to cleanse undead blight. In Second Era Glenumbra, the beacon guided a humble herb picker named Idona through crypt catacombs, igniting her heartbeat with luminescent sword strokes that banished centuries of necromantic residue. Upon completion, Idona felt no pride, only exhaustion and a newly kindled vocation as healer. Meridia's artifacts seldom linger in one grip. Once task concludes, light fades, and object dematerializes to await next custodian. Historians note that Beacon's choice often bypasses knights and battle mages in favor of unsung villagers, asserting Meridia's preference for potential over prestige. Hircines' gifts weave into bloodlines. The Hunt's blessing infected the first Nord champion on Solstheim when he slew a white stag sacred to Hircine. Under Blood Moon, his limbs twisted into lupin sinew, senses sharpened, my knife feral yet pulsing with primal ecstasy. Generations later, the Skal people still recount that night. Some keep hereditary amulets of Snobia bone to mute lycanthropic urges, others embrace transformation, serving as ritual wardens against frost troll migration. Hircine seldom imposes servitude. Huntsman and prey share mutual accord defined by chase, yet refusal of the game breeds censure. In late Third Era, an imperial governor attempted to exterminate lycanthropes via silver salt purges. Reports claim Hircine's avatar manifested in a blizzard, gidding winter wolves to breach garrisons until decree was rescinded. The moral stands clear. Balance by predation is law older than empire. Hermias Mora deals not in trinkets but in revelation. The black books, leathern volumes dripping algae, ink glowing sickly chartreuse, surface where curiosity festers. When Septimus Cygnus, scholar hermit of Winterhold, discovered one such tome within Glacial Rift, he believed destiny beckoned. Mora granted knowledge of Dwemer lockbox, yet withheld key until Cygnus's body suck *embed to divine frost. Scholars reading the account misapprehend tragedy. Mora's aim was never Cygnus's survival, but inscription of new hypothesis, Dwemer blood equivalency, into mortal scholastic corpus. Every black book extends labyrinth of memory corridors, each lined by quills that crave experiential ink. Reader transcribes self into apocrypha, leaving vessel on Nirn either mad, enlightened, or both. In present day, seekers, fluttering abominations stitched from parchment, whisper Cygnus's theories to young arcanists, perpetuating chain of knowledge that may yet unlock Dwemer's silent enigma. Mehrunes Dagon's manifestations escalate Covenant into insurgency. The Mysterium Xarxes, pennied in Dawn script by Dagon himself, seduced Mankar Camoran with prophecy of royal paradise. Camoran's cult, Mythic Dawn, interpreted the text as map to liberation from what they regarded as stifling dragon lore. Ritual immolations, the assassination of Uriel Septim VII, and subsequent Oblivion crisis unfolded as logical corollary. Here Covenant transcended individual dreams, becoming revolutionary scripture. The aftermath left Cyrodiil scarred yet fertile for re-examination of Empire's theological underpinnings. Scholars from the College of Whispers argue the crisis inadvertently unified provincial alliances that might otherwise have fractured sooner. Thus Dagon's destruction forged unanticipated cohesion, albeit through fire. Veamina curates dreams. Her skull of corruption, a wand carved of eerie bone, conjures duplications fashioned from target's subconscious dread. During the War of the Bendermark, General Strahg used the skull to confront enemy battalion with phantasmal doubles of their worst memories. Panic dissolved formation long before first arrow, yet repeated usage drained Stragh's capacity for restful sleep. Eventually nightmares breached waking hours, fracturing his command. The staff vanished, recovered decades later by Dawnstar priests who sealed it beneath temple sanctum, guarding it with lullaby hymns tuned to lull the relic's influence. Even so, children report half-remembrances of being visited by Mirrorself wraiths, testament to Veamina's persistence across lock and seal. Namira's ring passes through beggars' circles, its gilt exterior masking interior lined with blackened teeth that pulse faint warmth when worn. Those who keep it experience slowed decay and can derive sustenance from carrion. While civil society recoils, within Bosmary green-packed communities the ring garners reverence, as corpse consumption bypasses taboo against harming vegetation. In Bravel's slums, a healer named Karama studied the ring's pathology, discovering that ingesting decayed flesh under its effect purged certain parasites. Her clinic saved dozens during cholera flare, yet City Watch labeled her cultist, burning the hovel. Ashen smoke carried unanswered question of ethical nuance between survival and revulsion, a nuance Namira thrives upon. Hurrite's covenants seldom concern glory. The spell of Ichor, taught in hushed corners of alchemy labs, allows caster to draw afflicted blood into runic basins, transferring plague from many victims into one vessel for study. In Year 2 E512, Breton healer Aelard synthesized antidote to coilspite fever by volunteering as host, channeling sickness via spell of Ichor into his own marrow. Hurrite regarded act with pragmatic respect, reportedly dispatching a bronze-scaled emissary to watch the trial. Aelard survived, though skin etched with green fissures. Some priests claim the fissures glow faintly when outbreaks loom, marking him unwilling sentinel. The moral emerges. Hurrite's interest lies not in misery, but in balance through exposure and immunity. Malakath's signature artifact, Volendrung, migrates among orc strongholds as test of worth. Wrought from metal older than Nirn's mantle, the hammer redeems broken oaths. When the Orsinium Accord collapsed under Breton Redguard's siege, Warchief Kurog wielded Volendrung to fell citadel gates, carving escape route for refugees. Though city burned, clan lineage survived, seed for future reclamation. Later, the hammer surfaced in hands of wood orc insurgent intent on punishing Bosmary deforestation. Each swing uprooted Grat oaks, ironically harming the forest further. When Malakath withdrew his blessing, hammer petrified midair, crushing insurgent beneath weight of misguided rage. Thus Volendrung enforces honor contextual to outcast plight, but punishes fury detached from communal justice. Beyond these relics, pacts manifest through organized worship. Cult structures vary. The Order of the Waking Flame venerates Dagon with cells called cinders, each limited to 13 acolytes to embody fractal of potential chaos. In contrast, the hidden path of nocturnal eschews congregations. Initiates operate as solitaries, connected only by raven-feather tattoos visible under void salve elixir. Mephalah's Morag Tong functions as sanctioned guild within Morrowind, killings stamped with writs bearing tribunal seal, irony of lawful assassination reflecting Mephalah's delight in layered loyalties. Clavicus Vile's devotees gather at midnight bazaars, trading intangible commodities, memories, names, childhood innocence, like coins minted in forgetfulness. Each methodology shapes the Covenant's societal footprint. Visible orders invite legal frameworks. Esoteric networks percolate silently, influencing policy through unseen threads. Legal responses fluctuate across eras. The Alessian Purge criminalized Daedric worship, erecting pyres from Kvatch to Cheydinhal. Such repression deepened clandestine devotion, as fear amplifies allure, for nothing tastes sweeter than forbidden benediction. Conversely, Third-era Morrowind integrated select Daedra into temple orthodoxy. Pilgrims visited shrines to Azura, Bothiah, and Mephalah alongside tributes to Almsivi, illustrating syncretism as tool for social stability. The Khajiiti Main maintains lunar clergy that reconceptualizes princes as Joan and Jode's stray illumines. Through theology of eternal dance, Daedra become necessary partners in celestial choreography rather than adversaries outside it. Cultural lens decides whether Covenant breeds chaos or catalyzes wisdom. The artifacts and cults ripple outward into mundane life. Ebony Blade's legend inspired legal codices in High Rock forbidding concealed blades during council sessions. Meridia's beacon influenced stained glass motifs throughout Kvatch Chapel, symbolizing dawn triumph over tomb. Hirsane's lycanthropic cycle shaped Solstheim trade calendars, marking pelt harvest moratoria during Blood Moon to respect spiritual hunt. Even negative incidents produce pragmatic advancements. Hurrite's plague torrents in Wayrest led to first public sanitation aqueducts. Vehemena's nightmare contagion in Dawnstar encouraged development of dreamcatcher amulets woven from snow sabricat sinew. Thus pacts, though extraordinary, germinate ordinary reforms, proving again that Daedric influence infiltrates quietly, adjusting civic structures around initial fracture. Each covenant also leaves less tangible imprint, the psychological resonance scholars term echo of oblivion. Survivors of artifact encounters often exhibit heightened awareness of moral gradient. Clerics who cleansed Skull of corruption report deeper empathy towards sufferers of intrusive thoughts, having glimpsed their own phantasmal doppelgangers. Soldiers freed from Molag Bal's soul rigs become lifelong abolitionists, championing prisoner rights. Not all echoes are altruistic. Mythic Dawn remnants lingered for decades, seeding extremist cells across Calovia. Yet even destructive echoes force societies to articulate new ethical frameworks. In doing so, Tamrielic culture evolves, its philosophical sinews stretched by successive dialogues with immortal paradox. Amid these narratives, free will remains fulcrum. Princes offer frame, mortals supply stroke. A bargain may curse or elevate, yet decision to enter rests with beating heart that weighs cost against yearning. Legends caution, but they also affirm capacity to navigate perilously subtle terrain. Bards singing of Nerevar's counsel with Azura emphasize that he listened without surrender, extracting guidance while preserving agency. The Sijic monk Ritemsil stood before Sheogorath's paradox gate and acquired insight into chaotic symmetry, then turned away before delight soured into madness. Their stories illustrate alternative pattern, covenant approached as dialogue, not dominion. And so the ledger accumulates, blades enthralled by betrayal, stars refracting intention, maces echoing dominance, roses blooming seduction, tomes chronicling forbidden calculus. Every relic rests somewhere even now, in crypts, on altars, beneath restless waves. Every cult hymn still vibrates within mountain caves or palace corridors. Each pact once struck continues unfolding consequences in unexpected quarters, because Oblivion's sentences never end with period, but with ellipses stretching across generations. The subtle commerce between flesh and infinity persists, threading new questions into twilight hush, guiding scholars, adventurers, and dreamers toward next negotiation, written in starlit ink. Thus the Chronicle of Covenant stands neither as warning nor enticement, but as reflective pool. Gaze long enough and one perceives not alien gods alone, but mortal face mirrored in tremor of possibility, brow furrowed with hope, eyes alight with dread, lips poised to utter vow that may remake worlds. The parchment turns, unstained yet expectant, awaiting fresh script etched by hands trembling with the weight of choice, beating in rhythm with realms unseen, but never truly distant. Across the long skein of recorded history, moments arrive when the border between Mundus and Oblivion grows so thin that it quivers like a drum skin beneath an ill-timed thunderclap. When that membrane ruptures, whether by mortal folly, divine wager, or the patient calculus of a prince, the resulting convulsion reshapes empire's belief and even the grammar of reality. This chronicle turns now to those rare but cataclysmic intervals, the Daedric incursions that tested the mettle of mortal sovereignty and forced Tamriel's cultures to re-examine their covenant with order itself. The earliest of these epochal upheavals to leave coherent annals is Molag Bal, Plainmeld of the Mid-Second Era. Its roots lay not in a single ritual, but in a lattice of grievances the Prince of Domination nurtured over millennia. Bal regarded Nirn as unfinished simulacrum of his own cold harbor, a world that dared persist beyond his reach. When the Amulet of Kings passed from Alessian blood to tenuous custody among political factions in Cyrodiil, the arcane walls it sustained began to erode. Into that weakness Bal inserted the Soulburst, an explosive miscasting of the Dragonfire Compact provoked when Emperor Varan Aquilarios and the ambitious Manamarco sought to bind Akatosh's covenant for themselves. The resulting metaphysical shockwave cracked the veil across Tamrielic's sky. Dark anchors, vast chains of soul-forged iron, plunged from Cold Harbor, their hooks biting into Leastone Deep beneath City and Cairn. Each anchor drank ambient spirit like a drought sage draining sand, dragging Nirn closer to its frozen counterfeit. The response revealed the fragile glue of mortal politics. 3 alliances, the Daggerfall Covenant, the Ebonheart Pact, and the Ordinary Dominion arose, not from shared affection but from shared terror that domination would become the only universal language. Yet even these coalitions bickered while anchors thundered down. In Glenumbra, a Covenant Council paused mid-treaty to debate Grain Levi's. Outside, An anchor crushed 3 villages before mines returned to the larger war. Meanwhile, the Vestige, an unnamed soul-shriven hero, threaded Cold Harbor's labyrinth with companions drawn from all alliances. Their quest culminated in the sublimation ritual atop the Endless Stair, where Baal's own energy looped against itself, fracturing the planemeld's geometry. The anchors rusted into monuments, half in this world, half in none, testaments to how close dominion had loomed. Long-term consequences rippled quietly. Battle mages of the Second Empire studied residual anchor metal, discovering it resonates when struck by certain tonal frequencies, knowledge that later underpinned the siege engines of Reman's heirs. Priests of Arche revised funerary rites, weaving clauses that explicitly bar dominative claims upon the soul, lest similar lattices form anew. And in hidden chapels, Baal's cultists amended doctrine, learning that domination must court subtlety. Never again would such chains announce themselves so brazenly. Thus, victory purchased by alliances also tutored their adversary, ensuring the next attempt would slither rather than strike. Only decades after the planemeld's embers cooled, another front in the war between cosmoses flared, the Battlespire conflagration. Officially, the Battlespire served as an imperial training citadel, a ring of adamantine platforms drifting in the void between Aetherius and Oblivion, accessible only through synchronized sigil gates. Unofficially, it was proof of Cyrodiil's hubris, a fortress academy proclaiming mortal mastery of transliminal space. Such pride lured Mehrunes Dagon, whose own sphere exults in toppling towers. Posing as ally, the Altmer battle mage Jagathan facilitated Dagon's infiltration, disabling ward spirals during annual apprentice examinations. Dagon's Kinmarcher armies poured through, slaughtering instructors who had, moments before, lectured on the containment of Daedra. The ensuing siege lasted mere days, but echoed across centuries. A pair of apprentices, names lost to state censorship, survived by weaving portals from one Daedric realm to the next, Shade perilous under Nocturnal, the Chimera of Desolation beneath Mehrunes himself, and finally the Deadlands' basalt throne. There, they severed Dagon's manifest nexus, forcing withdrawal. Yet the Battlespire, sundered from its anchor spells, drifted into void, a gutted shell still glimpsed by star navies as omen of mortal arrogance. Arcane universities thereafter adopted the Battlespire oath, a vow never to raise a structure whose fall would tear reality twice. Even so, the incident sharpened Dagon's appetite, proving that mortal institutions, however lofty, were built on foundations no sturdier than manuscript paper left in storm. Nearly 4 centuries later, Dagon set his gaze upon a prize greater than any academy, the Heartland itself. The Oblivion crisis that red-lettered the final year of the Third Era began not with thunder, but with the whisper of a page turning inside the mythic Dawn's hidden libraries. The Mysterium Xarxes had promised its reader, Mankar Camoran, a paradise cut from Mundus at the price of dragon's blood. When assassins bearing Dawn's scarified palms pierced the imperial palace and slew Uriel Septim VII, the bloodlines sundering ruptured the dragonfires. Gates flowered across Cyrodiil like lesions, each a mouth through which the Deadlands breathed. Scarlet sky, ash rain, scoria rivers, the realm beyond came strolling into gardens of Chorrol and wheat fields of Kvatch. Yet victory required more than intrusion. It required severing Mundus's primal pylons, the towers that shape its metaphysical shell. Chief among them, White Gold Tower rose at Cyrodiil's heart, an Axis Mundi whose stone, the Amulet of Kings, still lay hidden with one last Septim heir. Camoran pursued, luring Martin Septim and the hero of Kvatch across clandestine plains carved within the Xarxes. But at the Temple of the One, when Dagon himself emerged, four-armed and towering among shattered mosaics, Martin chose reunification over retreat, smashing the amulet to call forth Akatosh's draconic avatar. The duel that followed scorched fresco, stone, and sky. In its wake, Dagon's gate network collapsed, leaving statues fused from blended flesh of Daedra and mortal stone, mute sermons on hubris. Religious orthodoxy reeled. The Elder Council, bereft of Septim divinity, could no longer claim mandate derived from a Leshan covenant. Priesthoods questioned whether Akatosh's intervention signaled approval or last farewell. In Bruma, surviving blades established the Cloud Ruler memorial rites, reciting names of every town where Daedric fire had fallen, forging communal identity from shared wound. Coluvian Estates, once hub of conservative Eight Divines worship, cautiously integrated Meridia's cult after dawn-colored lights were witnessed healing burn victims. Even xenophobic Valenwood invoked Hersane festivals to honor rangers who had harried scamps in its groves. Thus a crisis driven by Dagon's zeal ironically blurred old divisions, widening theological spectrum the white gold tower once kept narrow. Between these grand cataclysms stretch lesser known, but no less pivotal incursions. The Night of Green Fire, an Altmary tragedy, unfolded when Clavicus Vile answered the wish of Archtremage Tannian Laurelhand. Tannian sought perfect elixir to halt agging of the Crystal Tower's living root system. Vile granted a vial containing viridescent luminescence that, when poured into root cisterns, indeed restored verdure, then spread, consuming faculty gardens, pupil dormitories, and finally the towers in a memory globes, until walls wept chlorophyll. The tower survived, but the Sigic records therein twisted, birthing contradictions that fuel historiographical debate to this day. The incident crystallized Altmary fear of Daedric dependence, leading to the Edict of Illumination barring all extramundane alchemical pacts, an edict whose parchment still glows faint green at margins, as if remembering its origin. Likewise, Vaemina's incursion during the Stormwake Plague of Sentinel rewrote medical ethics. A cloud of iridescent spores drifted inland from Ababangora, infecting dreamscapes of thousands. Victims awoke screaming, minds trapped in recursive nightmare loops. The Sufi circle of Tawaka petitioned Vaemina for cure, offering to host her quagmire within a single hypnotic gem. She accepted, the plague lifted, but gem shards now pass among black market antiquarians, each shard a doorway to infinity of terror. Sentinel physicians thereafter codified the principle of oniric non-interference, refusing dream alchemy even to ease pain, lest nightmares bargain for passage again. Nor were Nords spared. During the long winter of 2E 573, Hersane's blood moon rose over Windhelm one full decade early, disrupting the expected cycle. Whole mead halls shifted into hunting grounds mid-revel, their warriors found months later howling along coastlines, pelts frosted with salt. Scald priests interpreted the anomaly as omen that Usgramma's heirs had grown complacent. They reinstated annual Fang trials, forcing Jarls to prove worthiness by venturing unarmed into snowdrifts on Moonsrise. No Jarl has since neglected those trials without subsequent coup. Through each upheaval, the White Gold Tower's remit to serve as axis and arbiter has been strained. During the Plain Meld, banners of three alliances fluttered beneath its marble ribs, while legates debated who might claim Ruby Throne should Molag Bal be cast out. When the tower's stone shattered at Martin's apotheosis, it left chambers humming with half-spent draconic energy that archivists still dare not catalogue. Yet the tower endures, burnt, stained, partially metaphysical, functioning less as seat of rule and more as lightning rod, drawing upon itself the first charge of every future storm so that provinces beyond might brace. Patterns emerge. Each crisis begins with asymmetry of will. A prince covets alteration, a mortal offers passage, an anchor, be it chain, gate, contract, or dream, forms. Resistance rallies in fractured coalitions that only truly cohere after shared loss proves inescapable. Resolution follows not from restoring prior order, but from forging novel synthesis. Alliances widened, liturgies redrafted, sciences advanced by necessity. Victory, when claimed, is Pyrrhic. The cost paid in stone, blood, and paradigm yields dividends in resilience, at least until next thunderclap. Even as quills scratch this chronicle, rumors claim Umbriel, an island born of Clavicus Vile's bargain with rogue Hist, once again drifts on unseen currents, kitchen smoke tasting faintly of shade lichen. Somewhere a child whispers to shadows for power, unaware which sovereign listens. And high atop the tower whose spire still glimmers with conflagrant memory, an archivist gently closes a volume, knowing the next chapter of crisis has already begun to ink itself in the hush between heartbeats. The weave of war against oblivion therefore remains unfinished, an ever-tightening spiral whose outer edge is tomorrow. Empires rise, artifacts pass, towers crumble and yet persist in new form. But beneath each shifting layer stands the constant, mortal choice confronting immortal desire. And in that crucible, Tamriel finds both peril and purpose, again and ever again, so long as the stars remember to flicker and the princes remember to reach. In the wake of each storm stirred by oblivion, the peoples of Tamriel resume the quiet labor of interpretation. Memory stratifies into custom, and custom solidifies into law or liturgy according to the temperament of those who curate it. Though the Daedric princes remain singular in essence, they are refracted through cultures like prisms, turning one beam into many hues. What emerges in one province as dread may glow in another as companionable guidance, while elsewhere it dims to superstition murmured in tavern corners. To follow those refractions is to chart a map of diverging sensibilities, each informed by landscape, ancestry, and the lingering afterimage of past covenants. Among the Dunmer of Morrowind, Daedric familiarity threads daily life as intimately as the ash that settles upon rooftops. Veloth's exodus beneath the triad of Azura, Bothaya, and Mephala left an indelible triune imprint. Munchadow's empathy, anticipation's discipline, web-spinner's subtlety. Temple orthodoxy once placed the tribunal above these good Daedra, yet even when Armsavy walked in gilded flesh, most households kept corner shrines alive with nocturnal candles. The Dunmer do not supplicate in trembling fear. They negotiate like kin, estranged yet respected. A father guiding his child across Fjorda might recite Azura's lullaby so the soot winds drift harmlessly overhead, then pause at a signpost to scratch Bothaya's rune, beseeching resolve for the journey. On holidays of resolution, assassins of the Morag Tong ascend Red Mountain under silent stars to offer Mephala silver threads cut from garments of those who wronged them, symbol that vengeance, once woven, must be neatly tied. When Red Year struck and Vivek's stewardship broke, many Dres plantation lords abandoned tribunal altars but reinforced Daedric ones, reasoning that princes who had never promised security could not betray expectation. Even now, rebuilding townships etch the Chimeri runes upon new council chambers as reminder that ascendancy over hardship lies in trials chosen, not evaded. North across the Sea of Ghosts, the Nords give grudging space to Daedra while hailing Atmoran totems and dragonborn myth. Hearth-Tales speak of Hermamora, the woodland man, as trickster who lures unwary hunters into icy pools. Children are taught to rebuff tempting whispers carried on blizzard gusts by shouting their lineage aloud, ancestry invoked as bulwark against seduction. Yet the tongues also keep hidden respect, for Mora granted the first liminal lexicon to Hogue Stormfist, allowing him to shape the Skyforge patterns that later birthed the Tharm. Hircine earns grudging honor each mid-year when clan chiefs gather under pines to witness the Great Pelt Hunt. The trophy, usually the hide of a snow saber cat marked by unnatural crescent scar, is displayed in mead halls for 12 days, then buried with grandsire bones to placate the lord of the chase. Molag Bal remains universally reviled, recalled in cragside effigies showing the father of vampires bound by silver chains. These are renewed every winter solstice with fresh links hammered by village blacksmiths, a ritual believed to keep fangborn plagues at bay. Orderly disdain does not prevent discreet bargains. During lean seasons, fishermen near Dawnstar whisper to Puriite, asking pests to spare smokehouses. If swarms still come, they claim failure of their own worthiness rather than godly malice, thus preserving pride without denying divine agency. On Somerset, the Altmer cultivate formality so refined that even the pronunciation of Daedra carries calibrated distaste. The Sapiarchs categorize princes as padomaic emergents, spiritual phenomena neither wholly denied nor openly met. University treatises debate Daedric metaphysics in flawless calligraphy, while palace guards confiscate illegal grimoires at harbor checkpoints. Yet contradictions shimmer beneath pearl-smooth surfaces. Crystal-speared spires in Cloudrest capture twilight to craft lenses mirroring Munchadow's glow, used in divination farwalks sanctioned one night per year. Sigic monks on Artium, though removed from Thalmor scrutiny, convene quiet colloquies with Azura's star oracles, seeking insight into static and dynamic time. The Edict of Illumination forbids unsupervised Daedric communion, but its clauses permit scholarly observation by those of verified clarity. Thus ducal heirs sit for seasonal debates with bound golden saints, measuring rhetoric against mania-tinged logic, all carefully warded so accidents become footnotes rather than crises. Such engagements reinforce Altmary self-vision as curators rather than participants, an aesthetic of distance that both empowers and blinds, a people who stare at storm clouds through traceless glass, believing the pain itself inoculation. In Valenwood, Bosmary ritual navigates Daedric influence through covenant with Y'ffre, the Bone Singer, yet loopholes lace the Green Pact's bark. Bothire is honored during the Wild Hunt not as corrupter, but as impetus for change within necessary ratios. When the hunt's frenzy ends, survivors carve runes of Mephala into antlers left behind, freezing chaos into narrative so forest history remembers. Namira's court holds unexpected esteem. Rot and decay feed the cyclic rebirth of the jungle, so Bosmer artisans weave bone lutes dedicated to her, claiming music sweetens the transition between flesh and humus. Festivals of nocturnal luminescence feature lamps crafted from wisprak fungi. These glow azure, said to attract Azura's notice, ensuring that moon paths guide travelers without breaching pact strictures against woodcutting. Outsiders may misread such practices as eclectic. The Bosmer view them as single chord in Y'ffre's endless symphony, harmonizing disparate spirits under canopy older than mortal memory. Khajiiti theology, tuned to the cadence of Joan and Jode, embraces fluidity of form, and so their lexicon for Daedra shifts with lunar phases. Azura, not simply Azura, is Elder Litter Mother, sculpting Jakajiat shapes from dusk clay. Hermamora appears as Hermora, keeper of the two paths, guardian of secrets that can free souls from all cages or ensnare them in moonless void. Khajiats celebrate this duality during the Sugar Sojourn, a 6-night pilgrimage across Ainquina where storytellers share parables of temptation and restraint. Sanguine, Khajiiti echo of Sanguine, presides over Sweetwater Den halls, but dancers temper revelry with recitations of the 8 tenets of balance, lest the red sugar drip into chain. Even princes reviled elsewhere find moderated niches. The bent cat Molag, a figure of lurking slavery, is honored only so long as chains are broken in same breath. A symbolic cracking of clay shackles at newborn rites ensures infants begin life unclaimed. Through such agile reinterpretation, Khajiits sustain cultural continuity with cosmic turbulence, moving like moonshadows along boundary of perilous worship. Imperial tradition evolved along a timeline of legislative oscillation. Under Alesha, the 8 divines shone in public squares while Daedra retreated to catacombs. Yet imperial pragmatism seldom equates prohibition with oblivion. In the First Era, Riemann II legalized limited conjuration for battlefield intelligence, commissioning battle mage orders to parley with lesser Daedra under Butcherseal constraints. The subsequent Aleshan reforms tried to outlaw the practice. Enforcement faltered when Mana Drenim of Cheydinhal secretly harnessed Golden Saint phalanxes to repel a Akaviri raiding fleet. By the time of the Elder Council's fractured regency, imperial law had codified a permit system. Guild mages petitioned the Synod for Daedric consultation rights, citing public benefit. Street-level sentiment remains wary. Children chant, "Close the gate, bar the jaw at dusk," recalling Kvatch's fall. Yet restoration architects study Cold Harbor stone to engineer frost-resilient bridges, and Legion quartermasters test Hersentand hides for winter cloaks. Empires may preach purity, but the road between necessity and ideology winds through vaults stocked with relics whose makers' mark glows ever so faintly in Daedric script. The Red Guards of Hammerfell inherit Yokudan disdain for unbridled spirit traffic. In their ancestral mythos, the 77 Yokudan magnitudes rose above Satakal's devouring cycle, mastering the walkabout to cheat destruction, while demons, Nartotambu exiles, lagged behind. Thus many crown families teach children to spit westward whenever Daedra are named, signaling refusal to be devoured by lesser eternity. Even so, pragmatism again cedes exceptions. Forebear coastal traders maintain a shrine to Kynareth Meridia, syncretized as Tava the Bright, patron of winds and cleansing fire. During malarial summers, benefactors sponsor Puriite cleansing fates, burning heaps of cumin and saltpeter to purify air, ceremony supervised by masked soothsayers who claim to decipher furnace smoke for omens. Martial orders sometimes venerate Diagna, an avatar rumored to share blood with Bothiah. Swords forged in his name bear serrated backs, echo of the prince's taste for conflict as refinement. Hammerfell thus navigates Daedric tides through martial honor codes, spirits acknowledged as adversaries to sharpen blades and virtue alike. The Orsimer root their social fabric in Malakath's code, a living ledger binding chieftain, wisewife, and clanless alike. Should an orc betray clan or oath, they kneel before totem anvil while forgewives chant litanies of ash and endurance, believing Malakath hammers spiritual impurities into slag much as impurities are driven from steel. Outside Ashpit's patronage, orcs seldom brook Daedric entanglement. Bothiah's role in Trinamac's sundering remains fresh wound. Yet in isolated strongholds, scholars whisper of Trinamac's rumored return. Statues discovered in Rothgar depict armored sentinel with broken sword reforged, eyes painted in star-white pigment, perhaps signaling altars to once god reclaimed from chthonic exile. These heresies do not outright reject Malakath. They recast him as necessary passage rather than final station, illustrating living religion's capacity to reconcile contradictions through narrative layering rather than erasure. Argonian spirituality filters Daedric perception through the will of the Hist. Root priests meditate in sap pools laced with dream nectar, interpreting visions as messages from sentient trees. If a Daedra addresses an Argonian, the Hist often speaks louder, drowning foreign frequencies with green chorus. Consequently, open Daedric worship remains rare, but not non-existent. Shadow Scales, hatchling assassins born under Eclipse sign, bear clandestine tattoos shaped like Mephala's spider, yet entwined with curling root script, symbiosis between web of intrigue and Hist's survival instinct. Some tribes honor Nocturnal as the silent water, a depth beneath marsh surface where secrets settle. Pilgrims seeking guidance wade into still ponds at new moon, letting leeches draw blood to fertilize lilies used in auguries. Yet even these rites must pass through Hist approval, for to ignore root counsel invites exile, a fate Argonians fear more than death, since identity blooms jointly with their trees. Among the cosmopolitan Bretons, Daedric affiliation splinters along feudal lines. Noble houses trace half-remembered elven ancestry and thus retain dusty libraries of oblivion charters pennied during Dione hegemony. A merchant prince of Weirist might commission a conjurer to secure soul gems from Apocrypha, while a rival baron funds chantry of Stendar crusaders to raid the black market vault afterward, commerce and piety intertwined in dizzying minuet. Peasant superstitions revolve around harvest omens. If first scythe stroke draws crimson sap from wheat stalk, villagers hang tin bells dedicated to Puriite to ward crop blight. During the March of Candles festival, children carve pig-fat tapers adorned with Namaran motifs, believing decay appeased in effigy will spare winter stores. Breton flexibility stems from hybrid blood, man and mer magica mingled, so cultural identity tolerates contradiction as natural texture rather than flaw. The Reachfolk stand apart, heirs to traditions older than the First Empire. Their shrines dot craggy hillsides, rough-hewn altars to Namira, Hircine, even Molag Bal, each a node in geomantic web called the Blood-Drawn Path. Matrons called Hagravens serve as living covenants, their feathered limbs marking bodily pact with Crowmother Nocturnal. To outsiders, rituals appear savage, bones red in smoke, hearts burnt to honor Prince of Crows. Yet Reach sagas record a balance ethic. For every life taken under Namira's gaze, equal tribute must be offered to Arke's mortal cycle, or sickness will hollow the clan. Over centuries, imperial governorships attempted to outlaw these observances, but every proscription sharpened Reachfolk resolve, weaving persecution into hallowed law that flames beneath perpetual resistance. Dwemer memory endures only in shards, but extant tonal treatises reveal calculated denial of all divinity, Daedric or Edric. Even so, within the sealed ounces of Kagranak's diagrams lie footnotes analyzing kynedrical entities of void curvature, their potential exploitation as power conduits noted in calm logician script. Here stands another cultural lens. To the dwarves, princes were measurable phenomena, variables in larger quest for synthetic apotheosis. Their disappearance leaves unanswered whether such dispassionate engagement constitutes immunity or ultimate heresy. Elsewhere, the slowed traffic with Daedra in barter markets, adrift on oily currents beneath Thras. They trade embalming resins for cursed pearls that sing songs of Namira. Coral towers their echo with chants untranslatable by landfolk throat, so this narrative touches them only lightly, acknowledging fringe dialogues where mortality's concerns blur with necrotic enterprise. Across these divergent landscapes, librarian monks of Cyrodiil's Firstfold archives attempt a taxonomy of Daedric reception, charting attitudes on 7-point scale from veneration to suppression. Their illuminated charts paint sweeping generalities, yet footnotes betray thwarted certainty, exceptions numerous, local practice defies neat index, for cultural stance is seldom monolithic. In any imperial city, one may find clandestine gatherings of Dunmary exiles reciting Velothi hymns, a Khajiiti moon priest consulting Bosmary spinner, a Nord mercenary snapping open a bottle of Sanguine's kiss with Redguard bard for a night of inadvisable reverie. Migration, trade, conquest, and love braid civilizations into knots no edict can fully untangle. Underlying all these patterns breathes a quieter theme, acknowledgement of choice. Whether people kneels, bargains, refuses, or reinterprets, each gesture affirms mortal agency under starry witness. Princes embody possibilities of power, of transgression, of illumination, of ruin. Cultures sculpt those possibilities into stories that instruct the next generation how and when to open the gate, how and why to bar it, and what to carry if crossing cannot be avoided. A Dunmer child learns to weigh ambition in Bothia's furnace, yet temper it with Azura's foresight. An Altmary acolyte is taught to guard curiosity with crystalline skepticism. A Nord shield sibling marches into Moonshadow aware that Hircine may test valor tonight. Such teachings weave resilience, ensuring that when Oblivion's echo rolls again across Tamriel, innumerable voices will meet it, some calm, some defiant, all distinctly mortal. As twilight settles over these reflections, one may listen for distant footfalls of yet unformed history. Perhaps in a marsh-shrouded village, an Argonian dreamer will soon decipher new syllables of Hist's song, and in doing, invite Hermora's gaze. Perhaps a wandering Bosmer will craft bone-antler lyre, whose resonance draws Meridia's radiant ear. Perhaps a Khajiit caravaner will lift prayer to bent cat not for chains, but for the cunning to shatter them. In each possibility, the wheel of engagement turns again, splintering into countless spokes, each carrying the weight of a culture's memory, courage, and need. And so the dialogue endures, chapter upon chapter written in Nightbloom ink across the unfurled scroll of time, the Daedric princes watching, waiting, ever willing to inscribe their reply with quills sharpened by mortal longing. At the furthest circumference of mortal reckoning, beyond the hawkflight of kingdoms and the crumb trail of recorded wars, the tapestry that binds all states of being begins to show its warped threads, thin, radiant fibers that weave Mundus, Aetherius, and Oblivion into a single breathing loom. To study those threads is to glimpse the hidden grammar of existence, a syntax written not in ink, but in conscious intention. Here the Daedric princes occupy crucibles of possibility. They are fulcrums about which choice pivots, catalysts that reveal where freedom becomes consequence, and consequence becomes fresh frontier. When scrutinized through this metaphysical lens, the princes cease to be distant tyrants or dark benefactors, and instead emerge as essential operands in the algebra of the Psijic endeavor, the Chim-haunted dream of Amaranth, and the silent negotiation that every soul conducts with its own becoming. The Psijic endeavor, whispered among Artium's marble halls, footnoted in Dwemer-tonal treatises, etched in smuggled Khajiiti riddles, posits that the mortal spirit may step sideways from linearity, scanning the unbound contours of the dream of the Godhead while retaining empathy for all who still labor within that dream. To accomplish such a transcendent audit, the seeker must first master awareness of the self as both actor and script. This dual sight cannot blossom in an inert aquarium. It requires friction. The Daedra supply that friction with exquisite reliability. When a Dunmurray mystic lifts a silvered mirror to her face and sees Mephala's web spiraling behind her pupils, she confronts a question that no gentle sermon could raise. Which threads are mine, which are woven for me? Her struggle to answer becomes the grindstone that sharpens perception. Similarly, a Nord hermit who hears Hermamora's tidal whispers echo inside an ice cave must decide whether knowledge outweighs sanity. The princes tempt, challenge, frustrate, and inspire, but always they quicken introspection, and introspection is the first step toward true seeing. Yet this catalytic function alone does not explain the princes' enduring entanglement with prophecy. At every inflection point in Tamrielic chronicle, Red Mountain's heart-stirring, the dragon break of dawn, the warp in the west, Daedric fingerprints appear upon the vellum of fate. Some scholars argue that prophecy is merely the long shadow cast by their immortal perspective. They observe greater spans of possibility and thus plant omens like beacon stones. Others suggest that prophecy is bidirectional. Mortals, through collective story, carve grooves in possibility space, and princes, sensitive to nascent pattern, nudge events into those grooves. The interplay resembles a duet wherein mortal hope strums the lyre, and Daedric resonance adds the counter-melody. One cannot unravel which note strikes first, a point elegantly summarized by the Sigic sage Esterel. Foretelling is the echo of ideas shouted across a chasm where both sides speak at once. Nowhere does this echo reverberate more profoundly than in Thales of Chim. The term surfaces in cryptic sermons, Dwemery symbol code, and the hidden margins of the Elder Scrolls themselves. Chim is the state of simultaneous union and individuality, a soul that recognizes the dream yet chooses to remain inside with loving artifice, shouting, "I am," but also, "I am all." Achieving Chim requires delicate equilibrium, lose sight of self, and the struggler dissolves into zero-sum love, the terrifying void of the zero stone. Assert self too aggressively, and the dream hardens, rendering the seeker little more than a would-be tyrant. The princes stand watch along this knife edge. Mehrunes Dagon personifies the annihilative passion that obliterates masks and leaves only red potential. Sheogorath personifies the dissolution of coherent identity. Molag Bal embodies the overreach of ego that crushes others into extension of self. To stride between them is to practice balance until balance becomes nature. Consider Vivek, whose own sermons dialogue with every prince in turn, gleaning from each a shard of necessary polarity. He steals spearprints from Bothia, laughter from Sanguine, notion of void marriage from Molag Bal, yet never fully succumbs to any one sphere. Whether one believes Vivek attained Chim or staged the appearance, his path demonstrates that Daedric communion can scaffold transcendence, provided the mortal remains author of the final stanza. Likewise, ancient Dwemer experiments at Kagrenzel sought to percolate Chim through tonal mathematics. Their brass laboratories throbbed with Daedric echoes captured in resonant geodes. Though the Dwemer vanished or ascended, depending on the witness, their equations survive as caution and inspiration. Power misapplied may cut the climber from the mountain's face. There are, however, subtler forms of ascent, micro-amaranths flickering in everyday lives. A Bosma spinner who weaves a legend that frees her clan from Herculean debt to Woodhearth. A Redguard navigator who charts a star path through Maorma typhoons by parleying with Pereite stormidolons. A Breton apothecary who synthesizes a serum from Namur and decay to cure stone throat. All craft small realities that did not exist before. Each act reaffirms the malleability of the world, resisting fatalism. In these moments, Daedric influence appears not as oppression, but as palette, vivid, dangerous pigments that an audacious painter may mix into unexpected hues. This generative role aligns with an oft-ignored etymology. Idra stems from our ancestors, the known, the settled. Daedra connotes not our tribe, the unincorporated outsider. Outsiderness is spiritually priceless, for only an external vantage can reveal hidden assumptions. A society that locks every door against the new eventually mistakes its hallway for the cosmos. Daedra keep doors ajar, albeit sometimes with battering rams. Their visits can devastate, yes, but devastation clears space for reimagining. The metaphysical city rapidly rebuilds its skyline with stronger foundations, richer mythic alloys, sharper philosophical spires. Nevertheless, danger is real. Some travelers drown in the well of novelty. The Order of the Black Worm sought immortality through Manamako's collusion with Molag Bal and found only hollow undeath. The Claw of Noctra assassins pursued shadow mastery until their names evaporated, leaving them as echoing silhouettes who no longer recognize moon from mirror. These cautionary endings underline a critical axiom. Daedric power is an accelerant. It magnifies intention, but does not edit it. A flawed premise, poured through Meridiac prism, emerges as a catastrophe more luminous and swift. That axiom loops us back to the central engine of choice. Every Daedric encounter asks a question that no other teacher can phrase. What do you truly want when no one compels you to want otherwise? Daedra embody cosmic laws that cradle mortal life, time, gravity, breath. Daedra ask whether those cradles are cribs or cages. They do not break bars for free. Bar ending is expensive and often lethal, but they hold up a lantern to show where the slats are thin. In practice, Daedric worship is seldom about blind devotion. It is bargaining for permission to be otherwise. Cultists of Meridia seek a world scrubbed of decay. Disciples of Veamina desire dreams that slice through complacency. Even those who bow to Baal, bleak as their creed appears, hunger for certainty so unambiguous that autonomy's burden falls away. To judge these desires is facile. To understand them is to grasp the endless inflections of being alive among constraints. Thus, when cosmologists debate the final architecture of existence, whether Mundus will someday sublimate into a new Amaranth or coil back into Padame's hunger, they must account for Daedra as co-authors, not footnotes. Should a brave band of sages one day orchestrate a second convention, rewriting creation's source code, the princes will hover at the margins with quills of void ink, ready to annotate. Some might sabotage the script, others might supply essential counter-arguments. For every Anu without Padame becomes static, every stasis invites unmaking. The princes ensure the dialectic continues, that no definitive period stamps the sentence of reality. Yet there may be a deeper motive beneath their ceaseless engagement. Legends scattered in Dwemery lexicons claim that each prince is reflex of the same consciousness that dreamt Orbis into fractal bloom. If mortals pursue Chim to wake within the dream yet dream on, perhaps princes aspire to the inverse, to feel the warm gravity of singular mortality, to be bound by skin and endings. Their interactions with mortals, boons, banes, liaisons, could be rehearsals for such condensation. When both eye tests a hero's mettle, language of conflict may mask curiosity. How would it feel to bear exhaustion after battle, to taste iron in throat that could bleed out? When Sanguine floods a tavern with inebriate Daedra, perhaps he seeks to glimpse ephemeral giddiness no immortal ecstasy can mimic. If so, the seeming gulf between god and mortal narrows to a shimmering membrane both parties press against from opposite sides, each desiring the other's vantage. This speculation gains weight from rare apotheosis events where mortals ascend to quasi-Daedric stature. The luminant Lick Manamako achieved partial merger with the necromancer's moon, carving a pocket dominion in the cosmic tidal foam. Tiber Septim, by mantling H. Jolti, Usmia, and the Dragon of the North, stepped into the Idra's sphere, defending linearity by becoming its emblem. These maneuvers hint at fluid hierarchy. Stardust may become throne, and throne may become dust, given sufficient narrative talk. The princes observe these permutations with avid attention. Each new demigod is a data point in the quest to model empathy or finitude. What then of Mundus's remote future? Patterns intimate that crises will continue to pulse in cycles, each larger wave cresting from the interference of countless smaller ripples. Perhaps a fresh plane meld will coil upward, not of chains, but of melodies, if Clavicus Vile convinces the Bard's College to encode Want into World Anthem. Perhaps Sheogorath will orchestrate a great mirth, a mania so jubilant that reason flickers out across continents, leaving societies to rebuild cognition from giggles and rhyme. Perhaps a renegade scholar will open a path to the deadlight, the rumored space beyond Aetherius, inviting Meridia to baptize universes not yet born. In all cases, the princes remain constants, unpredictable yet inevitable, terrifying yet vital, shaded but luminous. And mortals, they will choose, as always. A smith in Riffin will weigh whether to temper her steel in volcanic blood rumored to flow from Mehrunes' wound. A farmer in Calovia will decide if Perrite's blight-resistant grain offsets the shudder that crawls under skin at night. An orphan in Sensual will judge whether the skeleton key's promise of freedom feels heavier than the chains of unknown consequence. These micro-decisions accumulate into history's macroarchitecture, each soul adding a tile to mosaic too grand for any single mind to view whole. From such vantage, the Daedric princes recast as mirrors. They show what lingers behind polite veneers, reflecting potentials that civilization politely shelves in attics of myth. Like mirrors, they can frighten, flatter, distort, or enlighten, yet none of those effects originate in glass alone. The observer's posture completes the image. Stand cowering and you become small. Stand curious and horizons unfold. Stand arrogant and warped proportions mock back. In this reflective exchange lies the abiding truth that closes our chronicle. The boundary between prince and petitioner is less a wall than an aperture, one that frames not only peril but possibility, not only dread but daring. When the parchment of this account meets its final line, the conversation will persist in campfire fables, in half-remembered prayers muttered before risky leaps, in research halls where conjurers argue over sigil syntax. The Daedra will listen, perhaps amused, perhaps inspired, but always attentive, for they too seek endings worthy of retelling, and in the mortal heart they have found co-authors equal to that endless narrative. The quills are poised, the ink of mutable dusk still wet. The next stroke belongs to whoever reaches first across the threshold, whether wrapped in flesh that tires or fire that never cools, and dares to write anew upon the vast, unfinished page.